This program is a collaboration of personal opinions and individual free thought. It does not represent the views or narrative of the mainstream corporate media hacks. Viewer discretion is advised.
And here we go.
Live from the bell tower, taking a stand for your rights, your liberties, and all the bullshit in between. You're listening to Break the Bell Podcast.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the live version of the Break the Bell Podcast.
Hello, beautiful bell breakers. It is Monday in the bell tower.
It is Monday. It is September 12th, 9/12. And
Yes.
we are here to talk about 9/11 on 9/12.
Yes. Well, we all remember what happened on 9/12.
Yeah.
Kumbaya.
Oh, yeah. Everybody got together and collectively joined in hands and gave up all our rights to the government.
Right?
All our constitutional rights, basically.
Yeah. For the good of democracy.
Well, yeah. I mean, it sounds kind of familiar, right?
Yeah,
Like,
right.
Do you ever? It makes you wonder. Did they ever come out and say we're all in this together back?
Oh,
on
I'm
September-
sure. I'm sure.
in September 12th or 13th, 2001. Because the reason why I want to talk about this today isn't necessarily because yesterday was 9/11, because we've gone through two different 9/11s since we started the
Right.
show, and we have yet to do a 9/11 podcast.
Right.
Or a full-blown episode at least. But the reason why is because it, like, looking back at it, it just seems fitting to, like, the things that we gave up then, we are still living in that today. And it just applies so well with, like, the post-pandemic. People long have forgotten the post 9/11 era.
Right. Yeah.
And we're still living in that.
Yeah.
But
But every what, 15, 20 years they have to kind of refresh and come up with more regulations. Is that, or they try to like see how far they can push the line?
See, I was thinking about that. I was like, it's like, is it an every 20-year type scenario?
Yeah.
Like, did something occur in the 80s where we just kind of relinquished a bunch of rights? I don't know.
Yeah.
I wasn't really
I'm trying to.
coherent.
I mean, I don't know. Reagan and Bush took over.
Well, I mean, that was bad enough. That started all this shit to begin with.
Right.
So,
the formation, the NED.
Yeah, probably somewhere in there. But so we're going to be talking about 9/11 because it applies so well to today's world. And not only are we in the post-COVID era, but we're in the post 9/11 era with post-COVID stacked on top of that, and post January 6th stacked on top. So it's just like compound interest, basically.
Right. Yeah.
So I want to get into that. Want to talk about some conspiracy theories and some like kind of questioning the official narrative, because we're not a conspiracy podcast, but we do delve into quite a bit of what people would consider conspiracy theories, like the Great Reset, like election fraud, COVID vaccines, all that stuff. So, I mean, in today's world, and I'm going to get into this a lot, in today's world, I feel like more people are questioning official narratives. So I think it's important to go back and look at some of these, like this big mainstream narrative that people have called us crazy for so many years, and be like, well, how can you question that the government would kill you with whatever thing they want you to inject in your body, but they wouldn't be capable of pulling off 9/11 as an inside job? I'm not saying 9/11 was an inside job, but I'm saying so many people have been like, why would the government do that to you? I mean, they've asked us this for so many years. And now I want to know, like, post-COVID, can you look back on it and be like, do you think maybe after all the shit they've put us through for COVID, do you think maybe they'd possibly pull something like that off?
Absolutely. I mean, to be honest, I mean, everything that went through with COVID is exactly why I turned my thinking around about September 11th.
Everything about everything.
Well,
really.
yeah, right.
And
Everything.
it
Yeah.
should.
See how far the government had gone, shut things down, to control the narrative, to censor people, to character assassinate people, and then deny everything, knowing the whole time that the NIH was funding
Gain of function
research in China, even after Obama told them not to.
Right. Supposedly told them not to.
Supposedly.
Publicly told them not to.
Right.
But I was like, wink, wink.
Plausible
wink.
deniability.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
Mr. President, we'll do what you say.
Why are you winking? No, I'm telling you. Right. Yes, we got you.
Yeah.
Wink, wink.
No more.
Yeah. So that's why I think it's important to go back and look at these. The same with like JFK and stuff like that. It's important to go back and like reevaluate your feelings towards it, or your opinions towards it, because it's like once you see them do one thing, and once you've kind of flipped your mindset on the government doesn't love you, then can you maybe look at this and at least say something is really weird with the 9/11 narrative, or something was. I think the majority of Americans say something was fishy with the JFK thing. It's like 60%, I think, of Americans now question that and say, "Oh yeah, the government could have easily taken out the president." It's like, but no, they wanted to pull off 9/11. It's bothered me for so many years. We actually, when you worked with us, we have a coworker that when I first started working here, he claimed to be a conspiracy theorist because of like JFK and stuff.
Oh, right.
And then I was like, so what do you think about 9/11? He's like, I've never heard of any conspiracy theory. It's like, you're not a fucking conspiracy theorist.
If you haven't heard that one, then you're not a conspiracy theorist. Yeah. Well, and I think the people that would question the narrative are also the same people, though, that supported the president of the time.
The people that question the narrative?
No, the people that typically would question the narrative, right? The people that would think
that now would be think would be the type that would, were the Bush supporters back then. Yeah, because you always hear of like, I thought of that too. It's like they always call them right-wing conspiracy theorists for a reason, or like ultra-right conspiracy.
Right.
Well, the ultra-right conspiracy theorists, the ultra-right would have been backing Bush at the time. So yeah, that makes the most sense.
So
to me
there's
too.
conflict there, you know, and so a lot of people, I think, can short circuit themselves trying to put that together.
Right. It's like, how can I support the right and not support the Lord and Savior George Bush?
Right. Yeah.
The God's gift to humanity. Yeah, I see where you're going, and I had that same thought too. We're gonna get into this more. We don't want to overstep our.
Yeah, this is still the introduction.
Yeah, this is the pre-show.
We don't want to give away the cow.
Now, I pointed out to you earlier, I am in like true fashion wearing this Godzilla shirt.
Yes. You are ready to tear things up.
Yeah, well, my wife, she was like, are you gonna get dressed for this? I was like, yeah, I'm gonna wear my Godzilla shirt. I was like, it seems fitting for my topic tonight. And she's like, oh, what's your topic? I was like, 9/11. She's like, oh my God, are you kidding me? I was like, yeah, it's a more believable fictional story about a city being destroyed than the actual narrative is. So she's just like, oh my God. She's like, go away. So I haven't convinced her yet. So I told her to listen to the show though. So
what's the odds of that happening?
She said she might, because I think I piqued her interest, because I haven't actually had this conversation with her because her brain might implode on itself. So yeah, we're going to get into talking about 9/11, talk some conspiracy theories, and then talk about like how it applies today, or why it's still important today, which is basically what we just talked about.
Yes.
So we're going to
there's more. There's more.
We'll talk about it.
Yeah.
Before we do, we got to mention check out our store at breakthebell.bigcartel.com. You can find all these interesting t-shirt designs, like the I will not eat your bugs t-shirt, the we are not your pawns t-shirt, which is really applicable to today's story. I did release a new one. I don't have the image here, but it's in response to last week's episode when we were what did we talk about?
The internet.
Yeah, the internet being dead. And
the t-shirt. This t-shirt is not real.
Yeah, I said last week, I'm going to design a shirt that says this shirt is not real. And I did. So it's on our store as well. Cool. So go check that out. I'll have an image of it next time we do this. I completely forgot. So that's breakthebell.bigcartel.com. You can also get mugs and other things. So go check it out. Do it right now to help support us. Also, you can support us at patreon.com/breakthebell, and you can get access to bonus content as well as other merch options. So do that and help support us. Help us do bigger and better things, exposing bullshit for bullshit. Otherwise, just keep listening to us because that's what we value the most. Like and subscribe all over the place because that's how we get our name out there far and wide as far as the overlords allow, which isn't very far apparently.
Yes.
So please help us with that.
Yeah. We need your help to beat down the overlords.
Yes. I almost forgot to mention our sponsors. The freedom-loving coffee fix of freedom, Run Your Mouth Coffee, who supports your right to be able to question the mainstream narrative, specifically of 9/11, because it's your right to do so. And I think they were against all the policies that were put in place that were to kind of squash your freedom of speech and all your other constitutional rights. I'm pretty sure they were against all that. If they weren't then, they definitely are now.
Yeah, for sure.
That is Run Your Mouth Coffee, and they make really good coffee. So you can get really buzzed, like wired, not buzzed, like drunk, but wired.
That's a different product.
And then question the narrative at much faster speeds.
Yes.
Go to rymcoffee.com. Tell them we sent you by using the promo code Break the Bell, and you'll get 10% off your purchase plus free shipping. And that's a freaking awesome deal. And support companies that support your rights. Unlike the overlords, they don't support your rights. They want to take them away from you.
Yes.
So support small companies like Run Your Mouth Coffee that support you at the end of the day.
Yes.
Do it now. I'm ready to get into this show because I'm excited for it.
Yes, this is kind of your bread and butter.
It is, and I don't even have like I mean, I got lots of pages. I have so many things to talk, like so many topics that we won't cover. I just have a lot of bullet points. I'm just like, my job today is to make a truther out of Bill. So that's where I'm going with it. But we'll see what we get to. If we don't get through all of it, maybe I'll do a bonus content where I talk about some of the other stuff. There's just so much stuff out there, and it's so much harder to find now than it was like 5 years ago when I really was digging into this stuff. Because I remember certain things, and I'm like, I'm going to go back and find that, and it's like, you can't fucking find it anymore. So
I'm sure.
But we're going to get into the show, and when we come back, we're going to talk about 9/11. We'll be right back.
What did you say?
You talking to me?
What the heck are you talking about?
What did you say?
What did you say?
What did you say?
Are you talking to me?
Are you talking to me? Are you talking to me?
What are you talking about? What are you talking about?
What are you saying?
What did you say?
Are you talking to me?
Well, maybe he was talking to me.
What did you say?
Talk to me.
What in heaven's name are you talking about?
Talk to me, talk to me, talk to me, baby.
Did you just say?
What did you say?
You listen to me. You're talking to me.
Are you talking to me?
What the hell are you talking about? Who are you talking to?
Podcast awards.
Podcast awards.
Yeah, they have like Emmys for TV.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, I always thought, that opening right there should be like.
You think so?
Yeah, I do.
I mean, if you want to put me up for that, then
is that legal? Can I do that?
Can we put ourselves up for? Can we nominate ourselves? I think so. I mean, the president can vote for himself, so why can't we nominate ourselves for some kind of award?
What is it called? The
I don't know. Is there a podcast award? I don't know. Freaking iHeartRadio is taking over all those things because Hollywood wants to take it all over anyway. So we're here to talk about 9/11. And this ain't going to be your typical. I mean, I'm going to talk very briefly about like what happened because we all know what happened. If you don't know what happened by now, I'm sorry. There's not a lot of hope for you if you don't know the official story of 9/11.
Yeah.
But I'm going to cover like the basic timeline, official timeline, and then we'll get into some of the crazy shit because I mean, we spent enough time reflecting on 9/11, I think. And this was part of why I didn't want to do it on 9/11, because people are like, oh, you're so insensitive. It's like, well, fuck it, fine, we'll do it on 9/12 then.
Yeah. How you like that?
Yeah, which, I mean, personally, I don't care. Right. It's been 20 some years now. If you're not questioning it, then there's something wrong with you. So I want to say, I got to start. I want to say that 9/11 was like the start of all our problems in this country by any stretch, because I mean, you had since probably at least since World War II, this uprising of like the elitists, that like the warmongers that want to drag us into every conflict.
Yeah, and I think you can go back and look at different crux points in the history of the country. You know, you got Teddy Roosevelt, who again expanded imperialism. You had Woodrow Wilson that got us into the League of Nations, got us in World War I. You got FDR, who had a huge expansion of the government with all his social programs. You had Eisenhower warning us about the military complex. You had frickin' Johnson, who did his war on poverty
and ramped up Vietnam at the same time.
Yeah, and ramped up, and then you had, of course, you had Obama with
first
Medicare.
all the Bushes,
all the
Reagans
Bushes,
that drug
the
us into every war.
Yeah, the war on drugs,
the war in the Middle East, all the wars in the Middle East.
And then ramped up the Cold War, and then you got it September 11th with the Patriot Act and all the militarization of police, Homeland Security.
Right.
Basically war on its own citizens.
Right. So, like I said, I wouldn't say it started it all, but I would say it is certainly a turning point in American history.
Sure.
Yeah, it was like kind of slowly moving along, and then it was just like, here we are. You remember the let's get kicked off in so many ways.
Yes.
Do you remember when we talked about the election fraud, where there was that time at night where all of a sudden Biden's votes like spiked in like an instant? That was 9/11. It was just like chipping away, chiseling away at our personal liberties. Then all of a sudden there was that spike in the middle of the night, or in this case in the middle of the morning, that just like, here we are. We got to go from here to here. And it's same thing with COVID.
Right. There was another big jump with COVID.
Yeah, there's a huge spike in just not even necessarily them taking our rights away. It was with COVID, and probably the same with 9/11. I would say probably comparable. It was just like, here, fucking take them for our safety. We don't want terrorists taking over this country. You remember the anthrax scare? It's just oh yeah, I mean, not only did this thing just happen, but there's so many potentials out there that could possibly happen too.
And I'll never forget, again, when I was in college, and one of the questions was, is the Patriot Act a good thing? And I was the only person in my ethics of law enforcement class that said, no, it's a horrible thing. And everybody else is like, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, what does it matter?
You hear the record scratch, like,
I know. I'm like, what? Yeah, right. Exactly.
But the thing with that is, and we just talked about this last week, maybe, about college classes, how everybody's just repeating what they're like spoon fed. And are they actually paying attention to what is going on? Or is just like, and the Patriot Act? I'm like, hell yeah.
But I feel that attitude was pretty prominent with a lot of people.
You think it still is?
I do. I do feel like still that people are like, well, if I'm not doing anything wrong, what does it matter if they read my emails?
Do you think that's changed considerably though with COVID? Because again, we said it in the intro, a lot of people are waking up more since
I think
COVID.
With the middle of the country, maybe, but I think the coast are still very much, please read my emails.
Probably. It's like, here, watch me do nasty things to myself. I don't care. So, but yeah, this certainly this turning point right there at 9/11, where it's just like, I think that was probably the first time in a long time that we were all just like, take them all, take all our freedoms. It's fine. And it was the start of what the rulers at the time actually deemed the new American century. It was just like, America's going to shift right here. Like we're going from here, like the Cold War was officially over. There was, I mean, it was pretty quiet.
Yeah.
And you're talking neocons that like made their fortunes off of war, and they're sitting in the sitting cabinet members now. And then they're just like, guys, we're not making any money off war. We got to start something again.
When would you, so the, let's see, the end of the Cold War, was that 90,
89, 90,
89, 90? So then the first bombing of the World Trade Center was at 92,
92, 93,
right?
somewhere in there.
Okay, and then
that didn't work good enough, apparently.
right. Yeah. Well, what's funny is that oh gosh, I was just watching something on it, and okay, so there was a movie that came out in 93 called The Long Kiss Goodnight.
Okay.
And it has Samuel L. Jackson and Gina Davis, and in it she's like a sleeper cell like agent, right, who gets amnesia. And the guy says, he's like, you think that we didn't know about the bombing in World Trade Center, that we didn't just let it happen? I mean, so it was just like kind of that, kind of predictive, what do you call it, programming?
Yeah.
Right. So that, and then also in and I did not realize this because I didn't watch the show, but in the spring of 2001, the X-Files, they talked about flying planes into New
I
York
heard
City.
about that.
Yeah.
Isn't that bizarre?
That is. And again, it's been years and I had never even seen that until like a couple weeks ago. I saw that. I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah, I've heard about that. I haven't seen it, but I've heard about it. So speaking of this like new American century and this like this group of neocons, this is a quote before we get into the stories. This is a quote from the great Henry Kissinger, who,
one of our favorite guys.
Yeah, he went on to be the sec def for George Bush and like developed a lot of his foreign policies.
Yeah.
So this was his quote.
And he's also the mentor of Klaus Schwab.
Is he?
Yes, he is.
I remember us vaguely talking about that. Huh. Interesting.
Yes.
I keep forgetting about that. It's crazy how all our shows kind of
they all tie together.
So this was his quote early on in George W.'s presidency. He said, "I can think of no faster way to unite the American people behind George W. Bush than a terrorist attack on an American target overseas. And I believe George W. Bush will quickly unite the American people through his foreign policy." Now, I feel like maybe they added overseas after the fact.
Right.
Because if it came out like after the fact that he
like,
said
no!
terrorist attack, then they'd be like, what's going on? But still, like even just that statement, even if God forbid the government was let's say the government wasn't responsible for it. Like, I'm going to play both sides here.
Sure.
I haven't made up my own decision.
Right.
All I know is
it doesn't.
I don't believe the official narrative. Right. So I will follow all the rabbit trails I can think of. But even if they weren't responsible for it, this here clearly states that like
somebody thought about it.
Well, it at least pushes the whole idea of never let a good crisis go to waste.
Right.
Like they knew terrorists were coming.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you remember this, but on 9/11 when the first planes hit, I was a sophomore. So I'd have been like 15, 16, somewhere in there. And I remember when the first plane hit, first I heard about it. And because another teacher came in the room, was like, turn on the TV. The World Trade Center got hit by a plane. And I was like, some idiot was probably just flying a plane and crashed it.
I was thinking like I heard it on the radio, and that was
my
my first thought too. Is some idiot flew into the building.
But then, when you turned it on and then you saw that, like I watched the second one live right there.
Right.
And my first thought was, this is a terrorist attack.
Right. Yeah.
And I initially thought they were grooming us to this belief long before this, because I even thought as a 15, 16-year-old, I wonder if this was Osama bin Laden, because you remember the USS Cole attack, which was like 98, 99, somewhere in there,
99,
like a couple of years prior. And it just started this buildup of this mentality of, oh, Osama bin Laden's out to kill Americans and the big one's coming and stuff. And it's just like, oh, this is it. This is the big one.
Yeah.
And so they were already brainwashing us leading up to 9/11. So it lends credence to the whole never let a good crisis go to waste. This whole Henry Kissinger quote here. So, and that just explains a lot about their policies after the fact too.
Right.
Shannon is here. She says,
"Hi,
hello,
Shannon.
favorite duo. I'll have to catch up, but kick some butt. Damn it, Shannon, you're missing out. Come back to us, Shannon. You're our favorite too. So again, back to what we were talking about.
Yeah. Henry Kissinger
and this group of neocons that there was like 15 of them that were in this. I can't remember it was they were the ones that made up this
Council of Foreign Relations and
well, no, they were just I can't remember what they're called, but they came up with the New American Century
oh, gotcha.
program or whatever or ideology.
Yeah.
And in them was Kissinger and Dick Cheney and
Mm.
several others, and of them, like 15 of them went on to serve in George Bush's cabinet. So
yeah.
And at the same time, when they were writing all this shit up, I think it was Kissinger that was like, you know, we really need a second Pearl Harbor to pull this shit all together.
Right, right.
It's just like, how do you say something like that? And then 9/11 happened. And it's
Yeah.
just like, whoa, man, it takes a lot of stress off my back. I
Right,
mean,
yeah.
some people talk about like, I don't know what your thoughts are on like putting out negative energies and stuff toward, and like where you say something, it'll put out certain
Yeah.
energies into whatever reality. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
if you buy into that, you know, maybe that's all that was like, you know, these people are fucking evil as shit.
Right.
So just the fact that they put that out there, it's
Yeah.
just like maybe they put that into the universe at
I
some
think
point.
that it was something that it had been in the works for a while, to be honest.
Yeah.
You know, back in you know, like I'm a comic book fan. 85, 86, they came out the Watchmen comic, and it was the middle of the Cold War, and one of the heroes, spoiler alert, figured the only way he could bring the world together is to do a massive alien attack in the center of New York City, and that would unite
that's
the
next,
people.
by the way.
I know that would unite the people against a common foe, right?
Like Independence Day.
Right. Yeah, kind of. You know,
But that whole meant like,
that whole
this
intent-
is our
right.
Independence Day.
Yeah, well, but and think about it. I mean, it's like you said, the Cold War was over. You know, there were no more movies of Rocky versus Drago. You know, they had to come up with some big boogeyman, and you know, and the nation was very divided because nobody thinks Bush should have been president to begin with. They clearly thought that he stole the election at the time, and so I mean, what better way to do it? Right.
And again, even if they weren't responsible,
yeah,
I think they knew about it because of, I mean, it's not, I know they knew about it. There was all kinds of chatter out there. It was like Pearl Harbor. It definitely was like Pearl Harbor 2.0 because the whole 6 months leading up to it, it was just like drills. What if a plane flies into a building? Let's do a drill on this. Or, I mean, there was just so much. And even like the days leading up to it, it's just like they knew Osama bin Laden was going to do something in the chatters. And to come out after the fact and George Bush be like, oh, we were blindsided by this whole strategery. You're gonna say it. We had no idea that they would use planes as missiles to blow up a building. It's like you were wargaming that exact scenario.
He said it in X-Files 6 months earlier.
Yeah. There was FBI drills, there was CIA drills, there was Air Force drills, all for that specific scenario. The day of 9/11, NORAD, God, I got shit in my throat. Excuse me. NORAD, I think it was conducting a similar drill.
Yeah.
And they had screens on the people's screens. There was like fake screens so they could conduct these drills. So then when it flipped into real time, a lot of the people are like, is this real or is this the drill?
Right.
I mean, there's tons of documented evidence of this. And there was like, I think 42 different drills going on that day. There was so many like fighter jets that were like hundreds of miles away because they were doing specific drills. And it's just like, well, we never saw this coming. It's just like, so why were you wargaming this scenario if you never saw this coming?
And to use it to be like, well, our insurance, God bless, our intelligence agencies, they just weren't equipped for this. So we're going to have to increase our funding and restructure our intelligence agencies so that they can keep an eye out for this kind of thing, but and as we know, through the 90s, they were very much aware of, specifically domestic terrorism. So
yeah, no, it's going to bring that. We're going to get all over the place with this. It's interesting, like the Cold War and World War, like foreign war, Russia. And then that went away. And then they focused on domestic terrorism. And we talked about the ties between now and the 90s a couple weeks ago. And then there was 9/11 and it was back to, we're ramping up foreign wars, foreign terrorism. And then Afghanistan ended. And now we're back in domestic terrorism, like, and so it's definitely cyclical.
Right.
So we got to have the major domestic
that
event
means
to happen.
2030, 2031, we're due for another massive attack.
You think it's that far? So
No.
90s.
I'm going to give it
90s domestic,
yeah.
2000s to like. So I'd say
I'm going to go 2026.
You think so?
Yeah.
Because we got to have our major domestic event first,
right? And that's coming.
And then we'll have our
that'll be within the next year. I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree. If not in the next few weeks,
you're right.
So let's talk, I guess, about the official story, because we have to at least mention it, mostly so we can make fun of it. But just a reminder, let's just play this little video clip so you can have a refresher course on it, if it'll play for me. So here's just a couple clips from the day.
Hi, babe.
Oh, now it's You remember all this?
I'm gonna die, aren't I? No. I'm gonna die. Man, say your prayers. We're gonna think positive because you gotta help each other get off the floor. I'm now. A new type of war. That's what it is.
So if you're listening, that was the two planes flying into the Twin Towers, and then the two Twin Towers collapsing at free fall speed, which we all know is definitely plausible when it comes to like fires and planes crashing into buildings, because that just makes the most sense that that's what happened. And we're going to get there, but that's just a refresher. You remember the images. I don't think you ever forget those images, because we watched them in real time. I don't know if you did, but I watched it on the TV in real time.
No, I was sitting in a vehicle at a gas station, getting ready for my work job, and then the first building hit, or plane hit the building, and again, I thought it was some idiot flew into it, but then all of a sudden, somebody called, and so we ran over to the guy I was working with's house, and we watched on TV happen. And for me, September 11th is kind of like it's personal to me, because it's kind of like an anniversary that you have with, like, say, this girl who says she loves you, but then she cheats on you with your best friend.
Yeah.
And then and so it's like that's what the feeling is like.
Yeah.
Because I took
it still holds that spot in your
it
your
does, because
chest,
again,
but it's like a shitty spot.
Well,
in
it
your
is
chest.
because at first it was like, oh my gosh, we need to come together as a nation, patriotism, blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden there's doubt in your mind. And then it's like, oh shit, that they just made all this shit up.
Yeah, looking back on it, you see all the signs. It's like she was fucking around on me the whole damn
fucking
time.
Right.
Like,
so whenever September 11th comes around, I feel shitty, because I feel like the whole time I was manipulated into feeling a certain way.
Because you were.
Yeah,
you
well,
absolutely were. But here's the manipulation part right here. So here's the timeline of events of the morning of 9/11. And do you know what website this comes from?
No.
The worldeconomicforum.com, because that's the most reliable source. WEF.org, I guess. WEFforum.org. So this is the timeline. That's a sweet little graphic there that they gave us of the timelines.
That is really nice.
But I'm going to just read a little bit here.
American thing.
The chronology of terror. In its most simplest form, the 9/11 attacks can be described as a coordinated hijacking of 4 commercial airplanes, which were then used to fly into high-profile targets in New York City and Washington, D.C. Here's a summary of the planes involved in the incident. So here's the timeline. It says, we're going to breeze through this because we got so much more to talk about than this. September 11th, 7:59 a.m. American Airline Flight 11, a Boeing 767 carrying 81 passengers, departed from Boston to LA airport. It was heading towards LA.
Right.
So it had a lot of fuel in it. And it's a big ass plane with a lot of fuel. 8:14 United Flight 175 departs from Logan International Airport in Boston, bound for LA as well. 8:14 Flight 11 is hijacked over central Massachusetts. There are 5 hijackers on board. 8:20, American Airlines Flight 77 departs from Washington Dulles International Airport, bound for LA International Airport. 8:42, Flight 93 departs. 8:42 to 8:46, Flight 175 is hijacked above Northwest New Jersey. There are 5 hijackers on board. At 8:46, Flight 11 crashed into the north face of the tower, and that's when we all got the warning, hey, this is happening. Turn on your damn TVs. 9:03, 175 crashed into the south-facing tower. So there's a 13-minute time span between the two. Make sure everybody's watching TV before we crash the second one, so you can see that this is for real.
Right.
And the timeline is really interesting, and I'm going to get into that later because that ties
you sent me an interesting.
Yes, that's what I want to get
graphic,
into.
yeah.
The whole timing of it was odd for 4 guys that have no communication with each other. But anyway, just know right now, 13 minutes have gone by. We've all got our TVs turned on just in time to see the next one crash into the South Tower. At 9:28, Flight 93 is hijacked above Northern Ohio. There are 4 hijackers on board. 9:37, Flight 77 crashed into the western side of the Pentagon. All 64 people were killed. At 9:45, United States airspace is shut down, and that is something you need to remember. Because I remember that. I remember later in the afternoon seeing a plane fly overhead, and I'm like, that's probably fucking Air Force One, because I think from my memory, there was fighter jets next to it. I'm pretty sure it was Air Force One flying to wherever it was going. And because my thoughts were, we already knew, hey, every flight has been grounded. There's nobody flying. It's like, well, the only person that's going to be flying in a jumbo jet like that's Air Force One. But still, remember that. Airspace shut down. 9:59, the South Tower collapsed 56 minutes after the impact of Flight 175. At 10:03, Flight 93 crashed by its hijackers in a field in Somerset County, Pennsylvania. Later reports indicate that passengers had learned about the World Trade Center and Pentagon crashes and were resisting the hijackers. All 44 people on board are killed in the crash. So that's the one where they're like, hey, we're going to get them. We're not going to let this happen. And they attacked him, and then it crashed into the field and didn't get to potentially, I'd say, the White House is where they were talking. Let's see. 10:28, the North Tower collapsed. 1 hour and 42 minutes after impact of Flight 11. At 10:50, 5 stories of the western side of the Pentagon collapsed due to the fire. 2.5 hours after the first plane left Boston, the iconic Twin Towers lay in ruins in lower Manhattan, and brave first responders and military personnel were scrambling to save lives and secure the country. Life in America was set on a new trajectory. Seems like what we were taught for years, told for years. I mean, that all lines up.
We've seen. What we saw.
It's all the things. Nothing stands out there. That's the official story of what happened. And it's like, if you just read that for what it is, it's like, that's what they told us.
Yeah.
No mention of the straw that broke my camel's back of Tower 7 falling, which is never mentioned. I never remember hearing about Tower 7. Never once. Like if it happened, if they announced on the news, it was memory hold immediately until, like I said yesterday, 5 or 6 years later, when I'm just like, or not later, but 5 or 6 years ago, when I was just watching a documentary on it. And then I was just like, wait, what's this? What's this flight? Or what's this Tower 7?
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh shit. And that just opened up a whole new world for me, because it's just like, if you start questioning one thing, you got to start questioning all of it.
Right.
So we're going to get into Tower 7 in a bit, but let's get into some of this other. Let's jump around a bit though, because I said, remember that the airspace was shut down.
Yes.
Well, do you know what plane was allowed to fly
besides Air Force One?
Besides Air Force One? All the Bin Ladens that were in the country were allowed to fly out of the country.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I do.
All of the Bin Ladens.
Yes. Yeah. They rushed their family onto planes and got them out of the country immediately.
Yeah. So this is just a little clip from an article from grunge.com, and it talks about the White House greenlit a secret evacuation of the Bin Ladens. Yeah. And so I understand that let's say my brother, my brother, sure. Let's say he goes and like shoots up a freaking mall.
Yeah.
I'm not on the hook for what he did. However, do you think the cops are going to let me flee the country if that happened, like the next couple days?
No.
Do you think they're going to be like, oh yeah, we're going to get you out of here just to keep people from getting pissed off at you? We're going to shoot you out of the country?
No.
No, it doesn't make any fucking sense.
Right.
It's like, yeah, I understand that people are probably out for blood.
Yeah.
And you need to protect these people, but you sure as hell should have kept them in the country to at least question them.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So this one says, in the days following 9/11, the last place most people wanted to be was on an airplane. But the bin Ladens living in the U.S. couldn't get into the air fast enough. Though Osama had been a pariah to most of his relatives since the 90s, they were terrified of being labeled terrorists. Rightfully so. I mean, we labeled every brown person, whether they're Hispanic or freaking Colombian or whatever.
Yep. Yeah. If you had a different shade of skin, you were
like, dude, are you
where are you
terrorist?
from?
Yeah. But still, says, though Osama had been a pariah since the 90s, they were terrified of being labeled a terrorist. CBS reported that one of his brothers frantically called the Saudi Arabian embassy in Washington looking for protection and eventually holed up in the Watergate Hotel, obviously, because that's where all the shady shit happened. Many of the bin Ladens living in America were high school students who feared being murdered by a mob. Again, that's what protective custody is for.
Right. Yeah.
As with any filthy rich family, because they're basically the Kennedys of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah,
they were like stupid rich.
Yeah.
Stupid, powerful rich.
Yes. With massive connections in the country.
Yes. In Saudi Arabia and massive connections here, apparently.
Yes, in the Americas.
As with any filthy rich family, they had friends in high places. In fact, the highest office in the United States signed off on a mass evacuation of Saudi nationals. Between September 13th, 2 days later, and the 24th, the White House authorized 50 flights from 20 cities to take 160 Saudis out of the country.
That's crazy.
Including 24 bin Laden. So 24 bin Ladens back to Saudi Arabia. The FBI was jarringly lax about the whole thing and didn't bother to vet the evacuees for possible ties to 9/11, even though a lot of them were related to the guy who planned it. So they didn't even like question him, didn't vet him, there's just like, oh yeah, we got to get these people out of here.
Right.
It's like, why didn't they ship people out? Because they all were in the same boat.
Right. Yeah.
If it's just like, oh, we're scared the mob's going to murder them. It's like the mob was out for all of the brown people, not just the bin Ladens or and it's not even Saudis too.
Yeah.
Like a bunch of other Saudis.
Yeah.
It says the flights came to light in 2003. So 2 years later, much to the GW administration's dismay, filmmaker Michael Moore hammered the president for okaying the evacuations in the incendiary documentary Fahrenheit 9/11. I didn't know that's the one thing that kind of outed it, but
yeah, me neither.
Because I hate Michael Moore. He's a freaking moron. But so what do you think of that? It's just a little
that
weird,
that in itself
fishy.
is kind of incriminating. Yes.
Does that first instantly, I mean, at least draw suspicion?
Yes.
And again, same with, like, I'm going to talk about Tower 7. As soon as you get a little suspicion, you start seeing the cracks in the story.
Yeah.
Like the foundation looks solid until you see once you see one crack, you start seeing all the cracks.
Well, and when Bush comes on, he's like, we're going to stop at nothing to get to the bottom of this.
Clearly,
and if you're not with us, you're against us. But you guys go, because we don't want any trouble.
Right. So why do you think he let them out?
Again, connections, right? I mean, money.
Do you know the Bush connection with the bin Ladens?
I know they're close.
Do you want to know how close?
They're married to each other.
Not quite that close, but here are some bin Laden Bush connections that raise a few eyebrows. I'm just gonna hit the main couple here. That's gonna make you be like, "What the fuck?" If you haven't heard this already. The first one is oil connections. Did you know G.W. Bush and Osama bin Laden's brother owned an oil company together?
Did not know that.
Yeah.
Wouldn't surprise me, but I did not know that.
The connections between the bin Laden and Bush family goes back decades. Perhaps the first time of note that their paths crossed was in 1978 when G.W. and Salem bin Laden, the brother of Osama, set up Arbusto Energy in Texas. The business was far from a success, however, and by the mid-'80s, it having since merged with Spectrum 7 was taken over by a company called Harken Energy. So it says there were other wealthy Saudi investors connected to Arbusto. The person largely seen as being responsible for many introductions between the Bush family and these wealthy investors is our next entry on the list. That's this Jim Bath guy. He's another weird connection. Jim Bath not only was the connection between the Bushes and the bin Ladens, he was also a CIA asset.
Okay, that doesn't surprise me.
He was an asset around the same time Bush Jr. was venturing into the oil business. At the same time, when the CIA was under the direction of Poppy Bush Sr. He also had connections going in all directions outside the U.S., particularly with rich Middle Eastern businessmen looking for opportunities with American dollars. Many of them were members of the royal family and the rich class of Saudi Arabia, including the bin Ladens. In fact, his ties were so deep. The trust was so deep between him and bin Laden family that Bath entered into an agreement with them to be their representative for business ventures in America. Bath was a close friend with George Bush Jr. since their time together in the Texas Air National Guard. So not only do we have Bush and bin Laden's working directly together, but Bush is best buds with this guy that has really close ties, and he's a CIA asset
under his dad, who is
under his dad, who is head. Yeah.
What's Jim Bath doing nowadays?
I'm not sure. Hopefully, he's like burning in hell somewhere. So, then there's the Carlyle Group, which is one of those big elitist groups that the Bush family was part of, and the House of Saudi was part of, and the bin Ladens had members of. Because it talks about secret political agendas between the Bush family and several rich Saudi businessmen, including Saudi royals and the bin Ladens, and a gathering of specific people known as the Carlyle Group. Do you know what Bush Sr. was doing on the morning of 9/11? While George Bush was in the school reading an upside down book to the kids. Have you seen this image?
Yes.
Where GW is reading his upside down storybook, or having the kids teach him how to read.
That, yes.
Do you know what where'd my article go? Do you know what Bush Sr. was doing at the time? He was hanging out with Ladens, no less.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Irony.
It says, while GW was reading a book about goats in a school in Florida at the time the 9/11 attacks were unfolding, George H.W. Bush was involved in a meeting representing the aforementioned Carlyle Group in D.C. at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, and he was with one of the brothers of America's soon-to-be most wanted man, Osama bin Laden. So he's hanging out with Osama's brother at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, talking about probably world domination and shit.
Right.
While George is off reading books about goats upside down, or trying to learn how to read from kindergartners. And then his brother supposedly is orchestrating the greatest attack on the country since 9/11.
Yeah.
So weird there, you think?
A little bit, yeah.
What are your thoughts with that?
I mean, it's
not surprising, but
yeah. I mean, again, it goes towards the closeness of the families, which is even more bizarre.
I'm sure you've heard the fact that bin Laden was considered a CIA asset at one point in time.
I knew that, yes.
Says, while most of the bin Laden family were astute and successful businessmen, Osama's talents were seemingly more hands-on and best applied in the field, quote unquote. During the 80s, Osama led militia groups against the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. His group was essentially armed, trained, and backed by the CIA. So, I mean... We've talked about the Mujahideen and how we armed them, and then some of them split off and became Al-Qaeda and used our own weapons and training against us. We've talked a lot, especially back in the pullout of Afghanistan. We talked about that a bit. Well, he was one of these people.
Of course.
He was one of these that was trained by us, armed by us, taught how to be a terrorist pretty much by us. And then now it makes you wonder if he is the patsy that it kind of seems like he could be.
I don't think he's dead.
I think he is dead, but I don't think he was killed when they said it. I think because they talked about like kidney failure and shit years before. Years before Obama supposedly took him out with SEAL Team 6.
Right.
So I think he died a long time ago, but nobody wants to hear that the great America's Most Wanted
Navy
died of
SEALs like
cancer.
raid in and they're like, he died like 3 months ago.
It's like throw it, grab his body and throw it over
Yeah,
the
right.
ocean. Don't tell
Right.
anybody.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, there are theories that he was the patsy. He was the fall guy.
Yeah.
Why would they pick like such a connected person to like your own?
Yeah.
Was he like what's it, Tommy Boy, who's like the or like George W. Bush?
Probably.
Like
I mean, probably because it
the
sounded
retard
like
of the family that nobody wanted anything to do with.
well, it sounded like, you know, I mean, growing up, he was very like pro-America, and then like when Afghanistan was going through its whole deal with Russia, he he answered the call, right? And you know, the rest of the family was like, "Dude, what are you doing?" Right? And
You're putting a bad name on it. You're
Yeah.
putting a stain on us right now.
right. So I
like,
mean, yeah, and so they were probably like, George Senior was like, "Okay, who do you got that we can pin this on?" And they're like, "Well, we got Barry.
we don't like this guy.
Yeah, we got Aussie." You know, they had some weird name for him, Bubba.
We got
He's
our
not-
bro Bubba over here.
Yeah, but he's not one of our favorites. Why don't you go ahead and take him?
Yeah. I mean, it's possible he's the black sheep of the family.
Yeah.
I mean, they talked at the beginning of this that he was the pariah since the 90s.
Or was he just the idiot that when they're like, it had to be Al Qaeda, it had to be somebody against us, and then he steps up and is like, I did it.
Well, there are videos out there that originally Osama bin Laden comes out. Because you know when these attacks happen, you remember ISIS, how they would take responsibility for everything.
Yes.
It's like some white dude shoots up a church.
Drunk
and like,
driver drives through and like,
that
we
was
did
us. That
we
was
got
us.
that.
Yeah. Well, Osama bin Laden, after this, he's like, what? What do you? No. Yes, I do hate America, but that wasn't me.
Yeah.
That wasn't me at all.
Like,
But
I don't
then-
even know these assholes.
Like a few years later, his video supposedly surfaced where he took credit for 9/11. But then going back and like reading the like when there was some Saudi person that went and retranslated it, and he's like, I don't think that's what he's saying at all. I think he's talking about the incident.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's not adding up. He's not necessarily taking responsibility for it. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Just it makes you wonder if he was a patsy. Like, what did he do? We always talk about to get out of the good graces of the overarching umbrella because you're a part of such a freaking mega family like the Bin Ladens. It'd be like if
you said, they were the Kennedys of Saudi Arabia.
it'd be like if Ted
right?
Kennedy went out and they're like,
Well,
yeah,
he
we're
did.
pinning. Well, I mean, but he wasn't.
No, I
he
know.
got off though.
Yeah, right.
He killed a girl in a car wreck,
Yeah.
but that got washed done.
Right.
I mean,
they didn't send SEAL Team 6 after him.
to take him out. Yeah, but just think about if like Ted Kennedy was like they were just pinned on like some mass murder incident on Ted Kennedy or somebody like that of such prominence like that. That's what we're talking about here.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I do understand it is possible with their religion and stuff that he maybe was radicalized and after all the shit that America put them through in the 80s and 90s, he's just like, screw these guys. I backed them for freaking decades, and they leave us high and dry. They they want to, obviously, they don't give two shits necessarily about USSR. They just they don't care about us. They just want to take over this area and reconstruct it to be theirs. And I'm not for that. So maybe he was radicalized. I'm not saying he wasn't.
My understanding is there's a lot of ill feelings from the whole Kuwait thing.
Oh, I'm sure there's plenty of it.
We sent our people into Saudi Arabia and we left them there.
Right.
So
let's move on to the towers.
Okay.
Because we're already almost an hour into this. Let's move on to the towers and how they fell. And I mean, we're just jumping all over the place with like poking holes. Well, not even poking hole. It's like when you see like a hole in your jeans and you start picking at it and making it bigger and bigger.
Sure.
Like the hole is there, and we're just pointing it out. Yeah,
Okay.
we're just, hey, you got a hole in your jeans. Now you're gonna notice that hole in your jeans
like,
first. So the towers. I remember. So I was always on board with the mainstream narrative.
Yeah.
Except the collapse of the towers, for some reason, never sat right from the moment they talked about this pancake theory of how, and here's an image of the towers. And you see the South Tower, the second one, the plane hit between the 77th and 85th floor. That's considerably down. It's almost a quarter of the way down, I would say. So there's a lot of weight on top that I could almost see how the weight of that falling down could maybe start to smash some of it in.
All right.
But then you see the North Tower and how high it hit between the 93rd and 99th floor. There's not a lot of floors above that, not nearly as much weight above that. So they hit the towers. And the story goes something like this. Planes hit the towers and explode into it and cause fires and it gets so hot in there. I understand the whole meme of jet fuel doesn't burn hot enough to melt steel. I get that. And I also get the side that's like, well, it's kind of a hot box because I mean, wood and charcoal doesn't get hot enough to melt steel either. But if you apply the right conditions, you can make what's the thing where you make a forge. Yeah.
Right.
I was going to say where you forge thing, a forge. You can make a forge with like wood and charcoal with the right conditions. You can get it hot enough to melt steel.
Right.
So I understand what they're saying. Well, you don't understand the conditions in there.
Right.
But that my point isn't to prove whether or not jet fuel melts steel beams, because that's just a vicious circle we're going to talk ourselves around. But again, like even back in my very naive days, that the whole pancake theory where it's just one floor, like that floor or those floors collapsed and then all the floors started collapsing under the weight and it was just a domino effect.
I know I was very surprised by the collapse just because of how high it hit. And like you said, it didn't seem like there was a lot of weight. So when the building came down, I was just like, wait, what?
I mean, I'm not an architect.
No,
all right.
me neither.
So, and
I'm not to be.
Yeah, I don't claim to be an expert in this, but do you know how many times a high-rise building has fully collapsed due to damage or fires?
I don't think any.
Three times.
Okay.
World Trade Center 1, World Trade Center 2, and World Trade Center 7.
Okay.
The only 3 times in history all happened on one day, and we're all the same event. And I could almost buy into this theory, this pancake theory, until, again, 7 pops up, and it's just like, wait, your theory, pancake theory here, apply that to 7 who had no planes hitting it.
Right.
So how'd that happen?
So I remember them saying that they felt the second building, the South Tower falling, because that's the one that fell first, correct?
Yes.
That
I think so.
The debris like weakened the North Tower. And then I thought I remember them saying that they felt like the 2 buildings falling, the debris of that caused the weakening of building 7.
We'll talk about that. But first, let's look at controlled demolitions just to see what they look like, because just for fun,
I've seen them in movies.
Let's just take a look. Here is a couple of videos I'm going to show you of different controlled demolitions, and tell me if they look maybe similar to what we're seeing. So here's one. See how it just drops right into its footprint at nearly free fall speed? So that's one. And everybody's cheering for that one, just like the Israelis were cheering when the towers fell. Here's another one. This is in, I think, India. That
horrible job.
That one, didn't fall nearly as free. I feel like the hijackers of 9/11 did a better job of demolishing a tower than those ones, because those ones did not fall straight down. You saw like it fell kind of on the one side into the other. Yeah. And if for some reason because they put charges on all the floors, and they'll like sequentially blow each one up, so they'll just fall down on themselves. It'll fall into its footprint. Then you minimize the damage of tearing down the building, but you tear it down so much faster than if you were to just deconstruct it. And here is the third video.
For this to have happened, all of the buildings.
That was building 7. Yes, you're absolutely correct. Did it not look exactly? That one looked cleaner
Right.
with
Yeah,
no
much cleaner.
planes
Yeah.
falling in.
What was the positioning of Building 7 compared
It's
to
like-
the Twin Towers?
It was like they said. I've heard 3 blocks away to like 100 yards away or something like that.
Okay.
I think it's a few blocks away though.
Okay.
So the story is, and it's what you were saying. The first original story was what you were saying that what is going on here? How do I get my freaking screens back? All right. So the original story was that the particles and the pieces from the other buildings flew far enough to damage Tower 7, and that made it structurally unsound, and then it fell. And then there was reports that there was diesel tanks being stored in the basement of Tower 7 that may have caused explosions that may have weakened it. And then as people really started asking questions, it came out that no, there wasn't structural damage at all to this building. Yes, there was debris that caused office fires, like lots of office fires even, that weakened the steel beams and caused this to fall. Now, the problem with that is let me see if I can find this article. There is another tower. I don't know where it's at. I have another point, but I'll just say it instead. There was some other building that in another country, I guess, or I think it was in the 90s, there was a building that like 8 floors burned consistently for 20 hours straight. And it was enough to warp the steel structure of it, like the internal structure of it. Some of the steel beams shifted as much as 3 feet, and that building never fell. World Trade Centers 3, 4, 5, and 6 all had severe structural damage. One got like completely cut in half by pieces of the towers falling, like completely sliced in half, and it never collapsed. Others had like the bottoms just like ripped out of them. They didn't collapse. But this one that's like the furthest away suddenly falls in on itself because of fires, office fires. You think they may, if that's the case, you think somebody should get fired for designing this freaking building?
Yes, probably.
I've heard a lot of rumors about this. One was that World Trade Center 7. You'll understand this. Most people won't, but you'll understand this. But WTC 7 was put into test for 8 hours on 9/11. On the morning of 9/11, their fire system was put into test. So no fire response would come if some event were to happen. Now, again, this is just what I've heard. I mean, that's what if I was going to attack a building, I'd put it in test too. So we've talked about this. If we're going to rob a bank, we could just put it in test and go. Another rumor is that what was it? I don't remember.
So strategically speaking, what would be the reason to drop Building 7?
I'm glad you asked because I have that information.
Perfect.
Do you know who? Oh shit! What was his name? Hang on. Larry Silverstein was.
Okay, I don't. The name is familiar. I think we've talked about him before. But
he purchased all the World Trade Center,
like the whole thing.
Yeah, he privatized the World Trade Center in 2001. He just happened to buy the properties.
Okay.
And happened to put out major insurance policies on these properties months before, like a month or so before, like major, including terrorist attack insurance.
Of course.
Obviously.
Well, it was attacked in 93. Right?
Well, yeah.
So.
Well, and I'm not saying that is enough evidence. I mean, he made out like a fucking bandit with this.
Yeah.
But here's the interesting stuff on this that I didn't know this part. I've heard that part, and you've heard where Larry Silverstein is on, and he's like, yeah, the fire was getting so bad in World Trade Center 7 that we decided to pull it. And everybody's like, wait, what did you haven't heard this? Really?
So he said we decided to pull it?
He said that was his exact words. And I wish I had the video for you to see. He's just like, in an interview a few years later, it's like, yeah, the fires were burning so bad and blah, blah, blah. And so we made the decision to pull it. And it's like, to pull it.
Right.
And so, I mean, again,
do like all your buildings have a self-destruct button?
Again, playing devil's advocate. Yeah. Maybe he was saying like pull there's no more saving it. Let's pull the fire department out of there. You know, maybe, but that's just a weird choice of words.
Right.
And apparently that is specifically what they would say. And like, if you're going to demolish a building is all right, pull it. And then you take down the building, supposedly. But it's just freaking weird to me that he would
yeah.
say that. And just, again, it's one of those things where it's just like blatant. If he was in on this, it's so blatantly in your face, like, yeah, we did it. What are you going to fucking do about it?
Yeah,
and it's enough to piss you off, I guess.
Yeah.
But let me tell you a little more about this building, because it talks about he purchased a lease for the building in July of 2001 for $3.2 billion. His Silverstein himself put up $125 million. Only $14 million was his own money, though. The net lease covered the building, or covered 4 buildings at the World Trade Center. So they owned 4 of the 7 buildings.
Okay.
Including the Twin Towers and the retail mall. It may have been one of the most elaborate deals in the leasing history of New York City. The speed with which this painstaking, complex deal was closed is notable. So the most complex deal in New York's history, and the whole agreement was done in 3 months.
For that amount of money. That's insane.
Yeah, it's just like, I want to move on this fast. For whatever reason, he wanted to move on it fast. Now listen to this. This is interesting to me. It was well known that the World Trade Center was an asbestos bombshell. Plans were made in '89 to completely dismantle the World Trade Center, not only because of asbestos problems, but also the electrolytic corrosion problems. So this building was like basically worthless because of asbestos, and it was corroding, and it's only like 20 years old at that point, because it was built in like 72. So shitty building job, I guess.
Yeah.
So when he bought it for this exorbitant amount and painstakingly went through like a 3-month process to do this, he knew that it had all these problems, and they were wanting to tear these things down to begin with.
Bought them anyways.
But yeah, it was going to cost that. The reason why they hadn't is because it was going to cost too much.
Right.
And so it says apparently the plans were dropped because they were considered prohibitively expensive. The only reason the building was still standing on 9/11 was it was too costly to disassemble floor by floor. So again, he got off lucky.
Right.
So he buys I don't know if this is all true. This is less of a mainstream site here. This is from serendipity something.li or something. So this could be a lot of made up speculation, but it seems plausible, I guess. So it says, why would Silverstein, a knowledgeable real estate developer, pay millions of dollars to get control of a building that was uneconomic, was an environmental basket case, and had serious corrosion problems? Says all of Lucky Larry's problems disappeared September 11, 2001. He filed 2 insurance claims for the maximum amount of the policy, based on 2, in Silverstein's view, separate attacks. So he filed for 2 separate insurance claims because there was 2 separate attacks on his property instead of it just being one. He's like, yeah, I'm going to file a claim on the properties overall for 1 terrorist attack, and then I'm going to file overall again for a separate terrorist attack, even though
it's the same
property. It's the same damn thing. Yes. Yeah. So, but I think he ended up walking away with like $4 billion out of it or something like that.
Yeah, 4.5.
Yeah. So Larry Silverstein, he's an interesting character, to say the least. And again, this isn't a reputable source. This gets into like some what you may consider anti-Semitic type shit, because I mean, he's Larry Silverstein. So you can see where this probably, so I'm not going to get into that side of it, but that part of it there was interesting because I knew about him making out like a bandit with insurance claims. But if in fact this was a pretty shitty building already, and he's just like, well, what could I do then? And then he comes out and says, yeah, we pulled it. I mean, that would be the you asked the question, why would they take out World Trade Center 7 2? Well, A, it was a piece of shit building that he wanted to take down in the first place. B, apparently there's significant Secret Service headquarters, CIA headquarters, IRS headquarters, FBI headquarters, SEC headquarters, all within WTC 7. Another interesting fact I read about Building 7 was Giuliani had moved his headquarters there, and they had revamped the section of the building to be like bomb-proof with like bulletproof glass and like explosive-proof walls and shit, because this building was deemed like the safest like place in New York.
Building 7?
Building 7 was. And it's just like, you think you'd at least find, when the whole building pancaked on itself, you'd at least find his bomb shelter in the middle of the rubble, unhinged because of how secure it was.
Yeah.
But there's no evidence of that anywhere. So yeah, Building 7 was, again, the thing that opened my mind to, like, what the hell is even going on here?
Yeah. Well, and it says apparently in an interview, he said he typically would eat breakfast on top of the World Trade Center.
Yes, that too.
Yes, he happened to miss that day to go to it with his wife to a doctor's appointment.
And there was a lot of people, and I'm not going to get into specifics, but there was a lot of people that just happened to not be in the towers the day that it happened, like specific groups of people. It's kind of like with the Oklahoma City bombing, where we talked about how a bunch of the FBI agents were kind of out on a sting operation, happened to be, or not FBI, was it ATF?
Yeah.
Just happened to not be in the building at the time of the explosion. And it's just like, that's a little fishy. So when you get like specific groups that their whole group of people is just like, I decided not to come in today.
Yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, the sale of the World Trade Centers is almost as shady as what happened to the World Trade Centers themselves. When you read through the whole like story of it all, I mean, it's really bizarre how it all went down.
Yeah, I haven't really got too much in besides this.
When you take a read of it, because somebody else had gotten the bid originally, and then they bailed out at the last second.
Oh yeah. He lost the bid.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, the first place contestant was just like, never mind. Yeah. And like walked away.
But then they announced right after they gave it up, they announced that they're building the new Bloomberg headquarters downtown.
So freaking weird. So again, we can't dig deep into all these things, but we're pointing you in the right direction.
Right.
Like, well, why don't you look at this? If you buy the main narrative, look at this. Look at this. Look at Building 7. Look at the Bush bin Laden connections. Look at the fact that the bin Ladens were allowed to fly out, even though airlines were completely shut down for days. Look at these fucking things.
Right. Well, and they always say, whenever you're doing any kind of investigation, follow the money. Right. Who made out like a bandit?
Yeah, and you got Larry Silverstein, who
is
made
one of
out
them.
like a bandit. And I'm sure I'm going to get into another person that has such bizarre connections, and I haven't even made it'll probably blow your mind a bit too.
Okay.
So, but I'm going to talk about that in the second half because we are about due for a break. Before we move away from the buildings, though, did you notice on the videos of the controlled demolitions? Let me go back to one of them. Here, I got to pull this up for everybody to see. This is the India one. Notice all the dust and debris that goes flying out in all directions.
Yeah.
Very similar to what we saw on that 9/11 one, where you just saw it rolling through the streets around the corners and stuff. Just like vaporized dust.
Yeah. It was nasty.
And if a building were just to fall over, it wouldn't just like crumble into itself with the dust just like vaporizing. And so, but the investigators, like FEMA investigators, were like, well, because people and all specifically Building 7 were like, there's video, and I don't have it here because we don't have time. There's video of where you hear an audible explosion before the building collapsed. And it's just like, what the hell was the explosion caused by? If it was just office fires and there's not diesel in the basement, from what they concluded, what was this explosion? But then they're like, no, there was no explosions. Like the investigators and stuff were like, we found no evidence of explosive material. And then they were asked, well, did you test for explosive material? And they were like, no.
Right.
They didn't test this debris for explosive material. And then after it all happened, so that happened September 11th. How long do you think it would take to clear all that shit out and investigate a crime scene?
Yeah, I mean, months, like 6-7 months.
They got all that debris and shipped it to China to recycle. They shipped it to the lowest bidder, which happened to be China. They didn't investigate any of the debris. They didn't sift through the parts and feel like, you think they'd have like structural engineers in there, like what failed?
Right.
Like, how do we
Right,
prevent
right,
this from
yeah.
happening? What failed? No, nobody did. Nobody they just got it the fuck out of there. They broke so many investigative laws just shipping that out of there. But there was somebody who was in an apartment next door, or like a block or so away, that the debris like blew in her windows, and she took a sample of that to like some physicist or something, and he determined that yes, there was explosive material in this dust. He privately investigated, but nobody wants to hear that. Nobody will touch that because FEMA said there was no explosive material in this. So I don't know. Like, it's too late now, I would think, to nothing's gonna change exposing this shit.
Well, and I mean,
but there's just so many questions.
You know, plus who is was it oh gosh, who's the Clintons go-to guy?
Stephanopoulos?
No, Podesta.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Where
right.
he apparently had taken documents out of the 9/11 Commission, stuffed them in his pants. You didn't hear about that?
No.
Yeah.
Maybe I did at some point.
Yeah,
he doesn't sound familiar.
Yeah, so he stuffed documents in his pants from the 9/11 Commission, left the building, and destroyed them. And so and they found out about it, but nobody ever did anything about it. So
like, how do you allow such shoddy, shitty investigative work to
right? I mean, it's this massive like, you know, attack against America, and it's like, we're gonna get to the bottom of this.
Right.
But first we need to get all these people out, and we need to get rid of all this evidence, and we need to get rid of this paperwork. And now we're going to get to the bottom of it.
Right. I don't know. Where are you sitting so far? You hanging on?
I'm still hanging in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not too crazy yet, but
no.
I mean,
but
if you can make it this far, then you're fine. Because I mean, we're not going to get into the bizarreness of like there was like there's some conspiracy theories that they use like supersonic weapons to like vaporize them, like
right.
What's it called, like the audible weapon.
Yeah,
like,
I know what you're talking about.
To destroy.
Yeah,
it's basically because Nikola Tesla supposedly had like something where you could hit sound waves at building and you could literally crumble a building.
Yeah.
They're like, oh yeah, that was one of those.
Yeah.
I mean, it goes to like holograms. Planes were holograms. It just like things that really don't freaking matter.
Right. Yeah.
But
and you one of the things you sent me today said that the planes were like had
remote
like
control.
GPS, remote control from Tomahawk missiles.
Gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about
that. Okay.
That comes in the second half.
And then you had made a mention. I didn't even know if this was is this a conspiracy theory or not, that possibly people didn't die in the towers.
I mean, there's always certain speculation that hey, was there even people there?
Right.
I know Building 7 supposedly was already evacuated.
Yeah,
at the time
and I believe
before.
that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a while before that one fell, but I don't know if I don't necessarily believe that nobody died in the towers.
No,
because I don't think if the government's shitty enough to do this, they're shitty enough to kill their people too.
Well, and the way I look at it is they're probably like, okay, what's a high value target we can hit with minimal life?
Mm-hmm.
Oh well, 2,900 people. Okay, all right, that's acceptable.
That's not bad.
Right?
I mean, in the grand scale of things, that's not too bad.
Think about how many lives we're going to save, right?
Right. So we're going to get into break because we're long past due. And
you know, another little thing, Jim Bath, when I looked him up, not only is he involved with real estate, but apparently he's a big seller of airplane parts.
Convenient.
Yes.
Like used airplane parts?
No, well,
like post-crash airplane parts?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Interesting. Huh. It's interesting how the random connections that usually aren't all that random though. So we're going to get into break and we're going to come back and talk a few more of the theories, and then we're going to wrap it all up with how this applies. Like, why do we need to talk about this today? So we'll take 4 or 5 minutes and then we're just going to come back and continue this conversation. So don't go anywhere. Goodbye.
Have you ever thought that maybe voting, maybe all this politics constantly surrounding you is not the way to achieve freedom in your life? Hi, I'm Remso W. Martinez, and I ask myself the same question. That's why I'm on a journey to find true freedom in my lifetime. From learning about financial independence, to new ways to develop rugged individualism, to amazing guests living strange, crazy, amazing lifestyles that you've only thought might be real, but actually are. Go ahead and check out my new show, On the Run with Remso W. Martinez at the We Are Libertarians Network. You can find On the Run with Remso W. Martinez on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play. You know how the internet works. Come on down and let's discover how to achieve real freedom in your life together.
Hey everybody, I just want to take this time to give a big shout out to the very first sponsor of the Break the Bell podcast. That is Goulash Media. They can be found at goulashmedia.net. Goulash Media specializes in graphic design, web design, audio recordings, video work, wedding videos, music videos, even political campaign videos. Goulash Media caters to the little guy with the big vision. You can check them out at goulashmedia.net. That's GOULASH media.net.
You've got too much on your mind to be so conscious and not just believing every sorry thrown away. And it's about time we address the situation and begin to get back to you. We hold a candle like vigil for your self-respect. Reputation destroyed by what you can expect to be. Faceless in between, because I know you can handle it. To face the truth of the matter, it's still so much better to leave the light than drag it to your grave. Because you see what to make of this, how you can turn your own tables and work this, and take advantage of your failure like you plan to anyway. And it's about time we address the situation and begin to get back to you. We hold a candle like vigil for your self-respect. Reputation destroyed by what you can expect to be. The faceless in between. You're still alive, but you've been dead inside for a long time. And I understand why, but you did this to yourself. You did this to them. You don't even remember the name. Why should anybody remember you? Why should anyone give you another chance? You know the wrong. You know you deserve to be forgotten. Now you're everything you always despise. The mountains you built, the most innocent lies. And all this effort to cover up what you've done. We already know. We already see. Wake up and be better before you. It's about time we address the situation and begin to get back to you. We hold a candle like vigil for your self-respect. Reputation destroyed by what you can expect to be. The faceless in between. Time for you. You've got too much on your mind to be so conscious and not just believing every sorry thrown away. And it's about time we address the situation and begin to self-respect. Reputation destroyed by what you can expect to be. The faceless in between. Because you know you can handle it. To face the truth of the matter, it's still so much better to leave the light than drag it to your grave. Because you see what to make of this. How you can turn your own tables and work this. And take advantage of your failure like you planned to anyway. And it's the thought summary. Address the situation and begin to get back to you. We hold a candle like Daniel for your self-respect. Reputation destroyed by what you can expect to be. The faceless in between. You're still alive, but you've been dead inside for a long time. And I understand why. But you did this to yourself.
All right, we're back. You back?
I think I'm back. Yeah.
Good.
Yes. Back into the crazy train.
Yeah, talking 9/11. Talking crazy. Why are we talking crazy? Because we can. First of all, we can.
Yes.
We haven't done a 9/11 episode, so we're due for one. This is probably, unless some crazy evidence comes out in the future against this, is probably the only 9/11 episode we're going to do.
Yeah.
It's
No,
not
I
like
agree.
we're going to do a 9/11 party every 9/11.
No, it gets old. You
Yeah.
know, there's only so much you can do with 9/11. I mean, maybe we could do like, you know, some kind of wild, like, you know, what if type thing, or, you know, kind of. Yeah, you can't do a 9/11 party every year.
I mean, you can, but
Well, yeah, but it gets old. I mean, you could probably do a George Floyd party every year.
yeah,
right?
I mean, you got to.
You could just add the drugs.
However, I feel like there's probably a lot of listeners out there that are hearing this stuff and they're like, yeah, no shit. Yeah, no shit. But for the most part, this is just me talking to you like,
Right.
Hey, Bill, have you heard this? Have you been?
Yeah.
But if you're
but-
out there, there's people out there that have
Right. And I know, I'm sure there's lots of people out there that are like, wait, what?
Like, I know my wife hasn't heard any
Oh,
of
my
this
wife
shit.
either. I mentioned to her tonight before I left, and she's like, wait, what?
Yeah. And so if you know at least one person, there's at least probably
Oh, yeah.
a couple hundred people out there that, and it's not even necessarily, we've been kind of trained and like groomed. I guess I can keep using that word to not question that narrative. And that I feel like we're in a time now where more and more people are coming out and questioning like the COVID thing and what the government is capable of through COVID, through the vaccines and shit. And so now is the time to be like, you think that's bizarre. Now through this lens that you currently have, look back at this.
Right.
Just look back and ask yourself, is the government capable of something like this? Or I'm not even saying that the government did it. Are they capable of mass cover up of like, say it was like Saudi or Israeli related or somebody other than the Afghani freaking Al Qaeda,
right?
That was responsible for it, or something didn't add up. Maybe one building got pulled when it shouldn't have. You know,
But again, to allow yourself to go there, right? All right. Again, number one, most people that are going to question the narrative were all in on Team Bush.
Yeah,
right.
I was.
I was too. Absolutely. Okay. So first of all, you got to admit to the fact that, okay, Team Bush was not what it was cracked up to be, right? And then to admit the fact that your government is willing to kill off about 3,000 Americans, right?
To pull us into what? War? To pull us into
right,
for reshape the Middle East, to reshape the world.
Middle East, yeah, more control over American citizens.
Build back better.
Right.
The what was it? What did I call it? The Great American Century or the New American Century?
New American Century. Yeah. So to admit that, to open that door, I mean, what are you saying about the rest of? Because the first thing I thought of when I finally was like, okay, is this a plausible scenario? Okay. Did Woodrow Wilson sink a ship to get us into World War I?
Yeah.
Did Roosevelt allow Pearl Harbor to
yes,
happen to get us
yes.
into World War II.
Again, even if they didn't cause 9/11, they at least was a Pearl Harbor scenario where we knew it was coming and we just held out a bit to see how this played out. We talked about it in the 90s with the Oklahoma City bombing, and we saw evidence of the first World Trade Center bombing where they knew it was going to happen, and they were going to send in that guy with the fake explosives, and they're like, no, we got another job for you.
Yeah.
And it seems like the FBI was always like, let's see how this plays out.
Right.
Is this a scenario? And if it is a scenario, and if we can look at these and see how that's a plausible scenario, like Oklahoma City or WTC-1, then why can't we think it's plausible that the CIA was like, let's see how this plays out? Or like Dick Cheney, or who is the other, Kissinger, was just like, this might be really good for us. Let's just
never let a good crisis go to waste.
Because I know for a fact with the Pentagon, some other cabinet member came out and was like, yeah, I went down to the bunker and the vice president was already there, which is a little weird that he's already set up shop there. Because this guy apparently got down there like immediately, and there's VP already there. And somebody when the plane was flying towards the Pentagon already, there was somebody under Dick Cheney that's like, the plane's 20 miles out. And he didn't say anything. And then like, the plane's 10 miles out, and he didn't say anything. And the person was like, does the order still stand? And from what this cabinet member that witnessed this thought, it was the order to shoot down the plane, but the plane never got shot down. And Cheney's exact words were, obviously the order still stands because I haven't said anything otherwise. And so, I mean, this isn't a conspiracy theorist. There's videos of this guy, this cabinet member, saying that Dick Cheney said these things. So what was that order? Was it just let it play out, just let it hit, like whatever, just because if the order was to shoot down the fucking plane, why didn't they shoot down the fucking planes? That's the next question.
Right, absolutely.
A plane, they knew a plane was flying towards the Pentagon. They lost track of it for a long time. Like they shut off their transponders or whatever. But it came back on the radar's view. You're telling me the Pentagon doesn't have anti-aircraft weapons? They tried to tell us that after the fact. But they fucking do.
Absolutely.
Or they've got a jet somewhere that's protecting DC. They weren't all on some kind of freaking mission somewhere else. Apparently, when they did scramble jets, they're like, go out to the Atlantic Ocean and patrol from there. And so they were like hundreds of miles away even then, even after they scrambled. So I don't know. There's just a lot of weird shit.
You and I have talked about, I think privately, that that the belief that maybe Flight 93 was shot down.
Yeah, that was another one I wanted to talk about, was the cell phone thing is weird to me. Like the whole story of Flight 93, it makes for a good Hollywood drama.
Like the Ghost of Kiev.
Yes.
Right.
But did it happen? And the thing that got me questioning that was that there was cell phones being used at whatever thousands of feet. And I do have an article that kind of addresses that. We're going to jump around a bit because we can.
Yes.
Let me try to find that one. Because the cell phone thing strikes me as strange. 9/11 phone calls. Disturbing irregularities uncovered in the calls that flashed around the world. Let's pull this up. It says, from American Flights 77, Barbara Olson fleshed out the drama of my eyes are like blurry because I just stared into the light, so I'm having a hard time reading. Of diminutive Muslim hijackers using knives and box cutters to herd dozens of passengers to the rear of the plane. These and other reported calls have now been examined by the 9/11 consensus panel of scientists, pilots, professors, attorneys, and journalists. The panel began its research in 2011 with the Twin Towers and stunning collapse of the adjacent World Trade Center 7. The official conclusion that all 82 support columns, blah, blah, blah. We talked about this.
Okay, right.
That's World Trade Center 7. All 82 support columns failed and it collapsed, obviously due to office fires.
Of
obviously. It says the famous Let's Roll drama, which is the people on the phone. What's that?
Oh, Todd Beamer, right?
That
was his name. Yeah.
I'm not sure. The passenger that said "Let's roll" on Flight 93, and they attacked him and crashed the plane.
Right.
Says the famous "Let's Roll" drama. The passengers revolt on UA 93 was relayed by Pastor Todd Beamer. There you go. His 13-minute unrecorded seatback call to GTE telephone supervisor Lisa Jefferson, who reported Beamer as strangely tranquil, declining to speak to his wife, which I don't know in that situation. It's like, do you call your wife and say goodbye, or you not call and not worry her? I don't know. I think I would call her.
I think I'd call her too.
I think it's fucking weird then.
Right.
Eerily, Beamer's phone line remained open 15 minutes after the crash. That's a weird part too.
That is weird.
I mean, the plane's completely obliterated. There's no trace of a plane in this crater. There's no trace of a human in this crater, but the phone line stayed open somehow for 13 minutes. Oddly, the Verizon wireless record showed 19 calls were made from his cell phone long after the crash.
Interesting.
Initial media reports and FBI interviews detailed more than a dozen cell phone calls from planes at high elevations. Yet in 2001, a telephone spokesperson stated that sustained mobile calls were not possible above 10,000 feet. During the 2006 trial, the FBI under oath reduced the number of cell phone calls from over a dozen down to 2 calls made from 5,000 feet. So it went from a dozen calls to 2 calls made from below 5,000 feet. And the evidence they presented was from 1 call that was disconnected after 0 seconds. So they're like, oh, there's a dozen calls of these passengers calling their wives and stuff. They cut that down because they came out and they're like, that wasn't possible in 2001. It was only possible under 10,000 feet to make because of cell towers.
Right. Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, that was the thing that always, like, within the last few years, it's like, how the fuck are they making cell phone calls?
Right, yeah.
I mean, they talk about the plane phones, but specifically many of them, up to a dozen from what they're saying, were made from cell phones. And now they've cut that down to 2, but the only evidence they have is 1 that lasted 0 seconds. So, yeah, it's those things that make you say,
Yeah.
And so it makes me wonder if the Flight 93 happened and if it crashed, either A, the hijackers were idiots and crashed it. The most plausible thing to me is they're like, hey, he's on trajectory for the White House.
Right.
Fucking shoot that shit down.
Right.
But the government doesn't want to come out after 9/11 and be like,
who would do that, right?
we shot down, even though
we shot down our own American citizens.
I feel like, me personally, I'd be like,
right.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, yeah, that sucks for them, but
yeah,
shoot down the fucking plane.
Right.
I'm sorry for the people that are lost, but
yeah.
After 3 buildings were already hit with planes, supposedly.
Right.
Yeah, let's shoot down that fucking plane. But, and more evidence about it is that apparently was reports, and I saw it was like CBS. It's not like conspiracy. The CBS reported that so if a plane crashes, right, there's a debris field and it might scatter around.
Yeah.
Usually find pieces of the plane, but you didn't then, which... whatever, sure, maybe it just obliterated and all the evidence and all the bodies. Besides, I think they found like the driver's license of one of the terrorists, obviously. And when World Trade Center was hit, they found one of the passports on the sidewalk of one of the terrorists too. Yeah, the plane disappears into oblivion and melts, but the passport made it out safely. That's cool. That's fine and believable. But anyway, the whole plane obliterated. So you would expect like maybe a trail of debris or whatever.
Yeah.
But apparently they found a second site of plane debris 6 miles away from the initial. Too far away for it to have blown or like exploded on impact and thrown it that far. That tells me that that it got shot and the section that blew off initially fell, and then the plane continued to fly 6 miles before crashing into the ground. And the first site was the stuff that blew off the plane, and the second site was the plane itself.
Right.
So that tells me they probably shot down the freaking plane. And I'm fine if they did that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But this whole dramatic scenario that they came out, we don't. Oh, I mean, if we start looking and hating on the government for shooting down the plane, maybe they'll start suspecting us of other shit out there.
Right. Right. But like you said, of everything that was going on, that's the one thing that I would be like, you know what? You got to do that.
You got me there.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
you got me there.
How many other people could have died if you didn't do that?
I mean, I'm sure that the families would have been pissed, but come on now. So let's talk about the Pentagon real quick. Here's the image of the destruction from the Pentagon. And they always say, hey, there was just a 12-foot hole hit. How does a plane create a 12-foot hole? But you see on this picture, there was quite a bit more damage than just that. That was like the final wall. There was a 12-foot hole.
Right.
The crazy things isn't, again, this is a scenario where the plane just disappeared, like vanished. There's no evidence of a plane in that wreckage. No bodies, no nothing like that. It just burned up to non-existence. The weird things are not just the like the structural stuff with the towers. We can argue back and forth that steel can't melt from jet fuel. We can argue that this couldn't have been created by a plane. Whatever, we're not going to get anywhere with that. The weird thing is this: if you were a terrorist and you wanted to do the most damage, it would do more damage in this structure here. This is like layer. It's like strips, like hallways, like separated hallways. If you just nosedived right into the top of this, you would have taken out a lot more people.
And would take a lot less skill.
A lot less skill, yes. That doesn't take hard to push down on that thing
and come down. But to hit a wall like that, to come down that low,
it gets much more complicated than that. Here is the trajectory of that plane, because all they would have had to do is fly straight over and not nosedive on it. To get that trajectory, they had to do this like very specific, like 360 turn all the way around. And they came in at like practically like 0 feet and crashed like basically straight into this thing.
Right. Definitely a little bit more skill than just
somebody that failed Cessna pilot training. Failed.
Yeah.
Or like couldn't maneuver a Cessna plane, but was able to do this. And there are pilots that have come out and been like, that's damn near impossible.
Yeah. Right.
For a skilled pilot.
Yeah.
Let alone whatever they were supposedly like took 3 flight classes in a Cessna plane. So that makes you wonder. And is that trajectory even correct?
Right.
Because there's the theories that a missile hit it, and maybe this is the only plausible thing. Because I'm sure the first thing people ask is, how did they get that plane from that altitude to this altitude at that angle?
Yeah.
Well, they did this really bizarre 360 turn and came and spun back around. And I mean, the calculation to hit that would take some not just serious plane flying, but some serious mathematical equations.
Right. And I mean, like you said, why not? Like you said, they do more damage coming straight down. Why go into a wall?
But we got all the camera footage that shows that this happened, right?
Oh, absolutely.
They released five frames, not 5 videos, 5 frames where you see nothing except just like a blur and then just like a fireball, and that's it. 5 frames of video is all they caught.
What was the casualty list from the Pentagon? Like how many were?
There was a few hundred, I think. Because the other part of this was not only did they do this bizarre 360 maneuver, but apparently, this is the theory, apparently they did this 360 maneuver and slammed specifically into this one spot of the Pentagon that had been reinforced recently for terrorism. It had like double steel beams and like bomb-proof glass and stuff on this one side. So instead of nosediving down doing the most damage, they do this bizarre 360 spin and hit the one area that was just recently reinforced, causing the least amount of damage possible to the Pentagon.
Interesting.
And then there's the theories that were like, well, that wing of the Pentagon had this information and that information.
Right.
And we've all heard the rumors that, what's his name? Was the general at the time, that the head of the military that came out and said they lost like $3 trillion like on September 10th.
Oh, yes. I can't remember.
I can't think of his name either, but you know who I'm talking about. So there's that. There's just so many abnormalities to this. It's just like, if this was just this bizarre thing where 4 people slammed into this building, man, they got really fucking lucky, because I mean, you veer like a degree and you're like 2 miles off course in an airplane.
Yeah. Well,
1 degree is like miles.
Yeah. And there was a lot of luck going on that day. I mean, Silverstein made out. Terrorist hit a 1 in a million shot with an airplane.
Right.
I mean, just, I don't know.
And Pearl Harbor 2 happened, which is what Kissinger wanted. And the wars kicked off, which is what they all wanted, and it's just crazy how that all adds up and just works out in some people's benefit. Not for the 3,000 people that died.
Right.
But some people made out like a bandit.
Yeah.
Then
Dan Rather.
I don't think I've never heard this here. I want to know if you've heard this one. So a lot of these things are probably things that you've kind of heard a little bits and pieces of. This one is like straight Oklahoma City type fuckery.
Okay.
Listen to this report. This was on September 11th, 2001.
Okay.
This was reported by multiple people. Listen to this.
And word late tonight that 2 suspects are in FBI custody after a truckload of explosives was discovered around the George Washington Bridge. That bridge links New York to New Jersey over the Hudson River. Whether the discovery of those explosives has anything to do with other events today is unclear, but the FBI has 2 suspects in hand, said the truck load of explosives, enough explosives were in the truck to do great damage to the George Washington Bridge. But they arrested the 2 suspects and they're questioning them as we speak.
Do you remember that?
I do remember hearing
you
that.
do. I don't remember this at all. Do you remember anybody talking about it after 9/11?
No, because
has this ever been like reported on, like posts, like, oh
no.
yeah, the Twin Towers were hit, the Pentagon was hit, the Pittsburgh plane fell, and then we thwarted the bombing of the Washington Bridge.
Because I thought that they also had thought that there was a attack in L.A.
I don't remember that either.
Yeah, there was going to be there. I thought they had caught some people trying to do some damage out in L.A. as well.
Covering the shit up. That's like the Oklahoma City bombing. They cover up the second driver of the U-Haul truck, or the Ryder truck, whatever, the moving truck. It's just not there anymore. The information's not there. This information, like nobody talked about this September 12th or 13th or 14th or now. Nobody's talking about the fact that there was a truck full of explosives, and what the hell was that doing? Like. Was this part of this, or was this just some one-off thing that it's just like, oh, that's not reportable now because it had nothing to, it's like that's pretty significant, I think, to just be memory hold the way it has been.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So it's like you add all the holes together, it makes one really big plot hole, and it's just like really fucking weird to me.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So we got a few more weird things, and then we'll wrap this show up by bringing it back home. Let me find my notes because we've been jumping all over the place. So you mentioned the article about the autopilot shit.
Yes.
Let's talk about that. So this is a theory, and this I said remember the timelines, because this guy is saying, and this is I think just an op-ed, but this guy is saying that there is no way these 4 guys operated separately with no communication. He thinks that these were like flown remotely because of the timeline of it. And here's the timeline.
And it is bizarre.
It adds up, because what he's basically saying, I'm not going to read the whole article, but what he's basically saying is that if you were to jump on a plane, you were going to hijack it and you were going to crash it into whatever, the odds are you would probably get on the plane, and once it takes off, once it hit altitude, you'd get on it immediately so you don't miss your time. You're like, okay, I don't want in case something happens, I'm going to go ahead and attack now and take control of this plane now and hang out until the time I'm supposed to hit it. So here's the timelines of how they transpired, though, because it wasn't like the first one. You see the green here is where the plane's sitting on the tarmac. The yellow is where the plane is flying, and the red is where the hijackers took over.
Yeah.
You see on the first one, there was a matter of maybe 12 minutes into the flight, 15 minutes into the flight when they took over. The second one, there's a matter of, it looks like probably, it says the specific times between them. Hang on. But I can't find it now. So it was a little bit longer between the time it took flight. It was like probably 30 minutes. And then it was like 45 minutes. Then it was like 52.
It was like almost an hour.
Almost an hour, the last one. And what he's showing here is it's weird how as soon as it's like if they were remote flown, they'd get in position, lock it in remotely to where it was
And switch over
autopilot
to the next
into,
flight.
and then jump over to the next one. And you see right here where it's like they have control of the plane, and then right before the crash, they take control of the next plane, and then right before that crash, they take control. It's like they lock it in,
right,
and then move on to the next one,
Yeah.
and they're flying it remotely. And that's this guy's theory. He's like, it's just not it's just bizarre, like the order and the amount of time between them, how it was just conveniently one after the other after the, and it makes sense that they consecutively would be crash, crash, crash. But the fact that they took them over in the order that they did, rather than as soon as the flight, like 10 minutes later, like the first one, 10 minutes later, we're going to take over this flight. Yeah, maybe we'll fly it around for a little bit, go on a joyride, and then crash it right after the next one. But if they were not communicating, which no flight records, no recording showed that they were in communication
how would they have
with each
done
other.
it,
Exactly. Then how would they have known to, like, okay, I'm about to crash, you go ahead and take over yours now.
Right.
So this guy is saying that somebody, like one team, was remotely controlling this from the ground.
Well, and beyond that, right, to say like, well, they could have synchronized, but if you look at that chart, the flights were delayed. Right, they were delayed longer than what they would have been, and that's not something you could plan
let's
for.
scroll down to that one. Yeah, you can't account for flight delays when you're planning these things out so precisely. Yeah, because the scheduled takeoff of the first was 7:45. It didn't take off till almost 8. The second one was delayed 14 minutes. The third was delayed 10 minutes. The fourth was delayed 42 minutes.
Yeah.
And so, and then you have the different times, like between the gap of time. Oh yeah, here it is. So the first one between takeoff and deviation off course, so the takeover time, the first one was 15 minutes, second 28, the third 34 minutes, and the fourth was 58 minutes.
Yeah.
So he says, if we consider the case of technological control of the planes, whatever the system, there would have been one team controlling the planes from a remote area. One could suggest that in order not to make any errors, a single team would have managed one plane at a time in sequential manner. So what we were saying, like as soon as you get it on course, you move to the next one right before it crashes. Because he's basically saying, it's just not, it doesn't make sense. Like none of this makes sense. The delay time, how it was, like the guy that waited 52 minutes, he was basically like, oh, I'm very late, I better get on this because I'm going to miss it. So, but no, because his flight was 45 minutes late already, he'd be like, oh shit, I need to
hurry up and crash this shit.
Get on this right away. But he waited another like 53 minutes before he jumped on it.
Well, and even then it wasn't the scheduled crash, right? He was probably about another 20-30 minutes away from his destination.
Exactly. So the only thing that makes me question this theory is the fact that the Pentagon one did such a 360 maneuver right at the end, and they're saying like they remotely locked them in and then moved to the next one. Well, that I mean, maybe they I don't know that.
Well, okay,
go ahead.
Hold on. What if there was some kind of laser guided system and someone painted the target?
I mean, that's possible too. And before you get into and say, guys, you guys are fucking crazy, nobody remote control flies a plane, I have to point out this freaking technology owned by Boeing and Honeywell called the Boeing Honeywell Uninterruptible Autopilot. This came out in 2006 as a patent. So this was technology that we knew about in 2006. So if we know about it,
it was probably in works at least 15 years prior.
Yeah, right. So this is supposedly the Boeing Uninterruptible Autopilot is a system designed to take control of commercial aircraft away from the pilot or flight crew in the event of a hijacking. So it's basically to do the opposite of what it would have been implemented for. But if you can do the one, I would think you could implement it, like hack it and do the other. If you can take it over to autopilot it, you can take it over to manually steer it and remotely fly these. Apparently it's not in use because people are like, well, what about hackers? So supposedly it's not in use, but
not now.
Yeah, but I'm not saying that this is that Boeing Honeywell was used.
You're just showing.
I'm showing that there's technology out there
that does it
for this specific reason, not to crash them, but to prevent hijacked planes and shit. So I don't know. Do you think this is? I mean, it's
a plausible theory.
It seems more plausible than a guy who failed Cessna flight training.
Yeah.
Could maneuver that the way they
but
did.
Even looking at the time frames there, it has to raise questions that, okay, like you said, there was no way that they could communicate with each other. So there was something there, right?
Yeah.
And again, the fact that with the delays, you know, I mean, you can't coordinate that, right? So you can't be like, okay, we're going to take off at 7:45. We're going to take over
Synchronize
at
your
8:15.
watches.
Yeah, exactly. You guys take over in exactly 45 minutes. But when they're with the delays in there, you can't do that.
Right.
So it just looking at the way that he broke down the time, it does ask questions.
Right. I mean, these are all just like speculations that we're throwing out there,
Yeah.
different theories we're throwing out
exactly.
there. And you'll get to the point where if you read enough of them, you're like, well, how can this be one, but this be the they start like conflicting with each other, but they're just, again, we're just poking holes in it.
Yeah,
so we
exactly.
can show you the official narrative
doesn't hold up.
Well, the official narrative has been like it's been questioned by plenty of people that are way smarter than us. Like we said, I'm not an architect.
Right.
A bunch of architects question this. They're called look them up. They're called the Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. And there's like over 2,000 architects and engineers that have signed on to this to say, this is not right. This official, the 9/11 report has so many flaws in it. There is no way this happened. There's no way the buildings fell the way they did. Specifically, they focus on building 7. There's no way this happened. They're asking smart people are asking these questions that do this for a living.
Right.
And can you guess how many, with all those buildings that fell the way they did, can you guess how many building codes have changed since 2001?
None.
None.
Yeah.
Zero building codes specifically have.
Contrast to that, a horrible movie made in 1978 called The Burning Inferno changed all the building codes.
Yeah, that was the one that changed fire codes across the board. I
Yes.
remember. Yeah, it was just a movie made to
a horrible movie
highlight the problems with the fire code system.
Yes.
But this supposedly real life event where 3 towers, the first of collapse of their kind, no building code change.
Yeah.
And they can say all day that they want that. Well, it was the design was just fucking. It was doomed to fail from the start, and blah blah blah. And it's like, well, then why haven't you made codes to? I mean, maybe they have, but from what I've had, they haven't changed.
I don't. Yeah, I don't believe they have.
So, if their design flaw was that screwed from the get go, even though these buildings were specifically supposedly designed to withstand hurricanes and earthquakes in New York. Why earthquake
and plane crashes?
And plane crashes. Yeah. A Boeing 700 was supposed to be able to crash into this thing and not do any damage. And maybe a 767's that much bigger than a 700. But
doubtful
enough to bring the whole building to its footprint where there's no trace of it left. I just don't see it.
Buildings that were already mostly empty, right, because of the stock crash in '87, and buildings that were filled with asbestos, right, and were I mean, they were disasters to begin with, right? But you have that many buildings with that kind of construction, and it's going to cost a fortune to tear down anyways, right?
I mean,
just poking holes. Just poking holes.
Yeah, so many holes. Here's the last hole, because we're about out of time before we just talk about how this applies. We were talking weird connections earlier. We talked about the Bush bin Laden connection, the CIA connections, the Larry Silverstein connection. I don't know if you've heard this one. Do you know who Marvin P. Bush is?
I do not.
Can
Is
you
he related
guess?
to the Bushes?
He's George Bush's younger brother.
Gotcha.
George W.'s younger brother.
So there's Jeb, there's George, and there's Marvin.
Yes.
Marvin?
So let me tell you who Marvin P. Bush is and what he did, because he's not a politician like the rest of them. He's like Osama bin Laden. He's not like which I guess George W. really wasn't. He was just a cokehead.
Actually, all 3 of them are kind of fuck ups.
Yeah, that's true.
Nice job,
Please
George.
clap. But Marvin might have actually been the smartest for not. Maybe he was the one. He didn't get into politics because he was the smartest.
Right.
He was the president's younger brother. He was it says the president's younger brother was a principal in a company called Securicom. Do you know what Securicom was?
No.
They're a security company, provided security for the World Trade Center, United Airlines, and Dulles International Airport.
Oh, fuck.
George Bush's brother was head of a company that he was only head of it until like late 2000s. So at the time he wasn't head of the company, but he was a major role in the security company. I think it was like
probably SOPs.
I think it was network security company.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Or like electrical system security. I'm not entirely sure. It probably says in here if I read it. But he was in charge of a company that not only was responsible for the World Trade Center, but also United Airlines, which was the airline that was involved, and also Dulles International Airport, which was one of the airports involved. Says the company, Burns noted, was backed by Kuam, a Kuwaiti American investment firm on whose board Marvin Burns also served. I'm not sure who Marvin Burns was. Is that different from Marvin Bush?
Maybe it's a typo.
It says, according to its present CEO, Barry McDaniel, the company had an ongoing contract to handle security at the World Trade Center up to the day the buildings fell down. The company lists as government clients the U.S. Army, the U.S. Navy, the U.S. Air Force, and the Department of Justice. Does that seem like maybe a conflict of interest?
A little bit.
Like your brother's the president and you have the contracts to security for the entire military? Well, yeah, that's true. I mean, yeah, it's like we're going to go to war and we're going to spend trillions of dollars to the companies that we worked for.
Yeah.
And we don't get kickbacks. Don't worry.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So it says, in projects that often required state-of-the-art security solutions for classified or high-risk government sites. Stratosec, which is now Securicom, differs from other security companies which separate the function of consultant from that of service provider. The company defines itself as a single source provider of end-to-end security. So not only are they the consultants, like telling you what you should get, but they're also the providers. Yeah. They're like, well, what you really need is
this, and we can do this.
Yeah, they're great salespeople is what they are, basically. Including everything from diagnosis of existing systems to hiring subcontractors to installing video and electronic equipment. It also provides armored vehicles and security guards. So all things security related, it sounds like. The Dulles International contract is another matter. Dulles is regarded as absolutely a sensitive airport, according to security consultant Wayne Black, and the number of international carriers it serves due to its location size and number of carriers it serves. Black has not heard of Stratosec, but responds that for one company to handle security for both airports and airlines is somewhat unusual. It is also delicate for a security firm serving international facilities to be interlinked with a foreign-owned company. Somebody knew somebody, he suggested, or the contract would have been more closely scrutinized. So the fact that they're linked to Kuwaiti business and they're running this international American airline, not only the airline security, but also the airport securities, they're like, somebody is connected. Well, yeah, the Bushes.
Yeah, right.
As Black pointed out, when a company has a security contract, you know the inner workings of everything. And if another company is linked with a security company, what's on your computer is on their computer. So basically, we're giving all our information to the Kuwaitis, is what it sounds like.
Wow.
Yeah. Says a heightened World Trade Center security alert was lifted on September 6, 2001. They were on high alert, high security alert, and that was dropped 2001 September 6, 5 days before.
Okay. All right. So say that your company did security for a bank.
Yes.
And you
put the system on test and then all of a sudden the place got robbed.
Yes. You're right. Don't you think there'd be some questions asked?
Yeah, who do you think they're going to come at first?
Yeah.
First of all, they're going to come at you because, first of all, they're not going to realize that their system was on test. They're going to ask, why did my system fail? So they're going to come to me and be like, why did this fail? And I'm going to be like, well, I don't know, especially if I put it in test. But somebody's going to come out and be like, well, the system was on test. And they're going to be like, well, who put the system on test? It was your security company. But they weren't working there. So why was it on?
Right.
So that's why when I've always said, if I'm going to rob a bank, I'm going to make sure I'm on site working there, and I'm going to hire somebody else to because then I have a good reason to have it in test.
Exactly.
So
Yes.
y'all hear my plans here.
Yes.
So if I rob a bank, I'm going to do it on a scheduled maintenance day. I'm going to have the
Yes.
system in test, and then I'm going to hire somebody to come rob the
While
bank
you're
for
there
me. Yes,
working.
because I cover my tracks better than George Bush's brother.
Yeah, right. Marvin.
So it says the World Trade Center was destroyed just days after a heightened security alert was lifted at the landmark 110-story towers, security personnel said yesterday, or on September 11th. Daria Cord, a guard at Tower 1, said the security detail had been working 12-hour shifts for the past 2 weeks because of numerous phone threats. But on Thursday, the 6th, bomb-sniffing dogs were abruptly removed. Yeah. There's that. And people ask, well, if it was controlled demolition, how would you get all those explosives in there? There's rumors that there was elevator maintenance being done at night in the towers.
Okay.
You could have easily transferred shit in there.
Easily.
Apparently, one of the companies working on some of the renovations actually was located in Tower 7, so they could have been doing everything in-house and not raised a lot of questions.
Which may be why Building 7 had to come down.
And all the documents and records of any kind of maintenance on those buildings, where do you suppose that is?
It's in China now.
Yeah, it's burned up in the disintegrated rubble in the buildings. So lots of holes.
Lots of holes.
That's the last hole that I have for this. I want to move on, but I want to get where's your brain at right now, Bill?
Yeah, right now I'm just like I'm thinking of the meme of the guy with the whiteboard behind him with all the little lines running all over the place, and he's like,
"Yes,
yeah,
I figure I've solved it."
Yeah, no, I mean, to me, it's like, yeah, I mean, with this many holes that are in the narrative,
and so many connections,
and
of
nobody's
people in high
asking the
places.
questions.
Yeah,
nobody in the high places are asking these questions.
Because they know not to ask these questions.
Exactly, right?
They're actually covering up these questions.
Yeah.
Like even some of the people that were working on the investigation were like super pissed off that they weren't getting all the information that they were asking for. And they were pretty much being like directed, like where to look, what to look. It comes back to like, well, was there evidence of explosives? No, we didn't see any. Well, did you test for them? No, we didn't test for them. Well, of course you didn't fucking find them if you're not testing. Why wouldn't you test for explosives? Even if you didn't think there was explosives, why wouldn't you test for every goddamn thing to figure out?
Yes. Yes.
Another group of people that questioned the narrative. It's called the what was it? It was called the Toronto. Shit, I can't think of it.
Canadians?
Yeah, Canadians questioned this. It was called the Toronto hearings. They basically did like an investigation, like a trial in Toronto of looking at all the evidence and saying it's a 9/11, like Canada, who wasn't even necessarily not directly affected. I mean, yeah, they got drug into war with us too, but not directly affected. Canadians were like, oh, this looks fucking weird. The Americans are up to something here. Let's investigate it ourselves. And they came to the conclusion that throw the whole 9/11 report out the window. They concluded that crimes against humanity were committed, and that whoever was responsible, they refused to say who they thought was responsible, probably because they didn't want to get killed.
Right. Oh yeah.
But whoever's responsible should be brought criminal charges against them. I mean, that's Canadians.
Yeah.
The Canadians are. We should be able to ask it if the goddamn Canadians are willing to ask the questions.
Yeah. No shit.
So there's just so much shit out there.
Yeah.
And then I guess you ask yourself, why are we bringing this up again? And it comes back to what we talked about in the beginning.
Yeah.
With everything that's going on right now, we should be able to start focusing people to look back, like through these lenses. You're waking up. I feel like people are waking up to the bullshit of the government.
Right.
And yes, I get that an event like that, I don't even know. Could you call that worse than what happened for COVID? I mean, short term, sure.
Yeah.
But if what we think about the vaccines is actually the thing, and the fact that they're pushing them hardcore and not showing you, again, not disclosing information, they're manipulating the evidence. Talk about manipulating evidence. When they brought up, when they were doing like simulations of Tower 7 falling, They finally got it to do exactly what it did. And they're like, this is what happened. Well, come to find out, they like omitted a bunch of data points to make it do. They manipulated the data to make it do.
Right,
and I heard they actually like, I don't know how true this is. In the simulation, they just left like all the screws out in the support beam, so it would like collapse the way it did. So manipulation of evidence. And then you look at today, manipulation of the COVID vax effectiveness, manipulation of the COVID test results, manipulation of the facts surrounding January 6th. And it's just like so many people are like, yeah, there's really shitty stuff going on here. And then you can go to them and be like, you see what your government can do to you? Just wait till you look back 21 years. Look at that. And then they're like, no, they want to do that. And then you can just start poking holes in it. And I feel like we're in a spot now where maybe people will start to like pay attention to that and like look back and be like, what the fuck was I thinking?
Yeah. But again, you have to be able to allow yourself to do that, because when you look at that and be like, would the government really knock off 3,000 Americans? Then you have to, and we know the whole Vietnam thing was a sham, right? You got to go back and look at all the other wars and what happened with that, and ask yourself, okay, the government is able to do this and willing to do this.
Don't start with the government killed 3,000 people, because, and the sad thing is that most people, when you're like 9/11 was a hoax or anything, false flag, whatever, not even, as soon as you mention 9/11, the story wasn't true, they just shut down it completely. It's just like,
no, I know.
No, I'm not going down. I'm not a truther. None of that.
Right.
If you open you just like the way I was introduced to it, you show one hole in it.
Yeah.
Just like, well, how did this happen? What building 7? There was a 7th tower?
Right.
Wait, George Bush was directly connected to Osama bin Laden's brother?
Right.
Wait, George Bush's brother was in charge of security of, I didn't even know he had a brother named Marvin. He's in charge of security of not only the airport, the tower, but also the airline.
Yeah.
Wait a second. There's something. And it's like, if you question any of it, you have to question all of it.
Right. Exactly.
It's like any trial. It's like,
right.
If they'll lie about this,
yes,
what else are they lying about? In any freaking like witness, that's what they initially do. They poke holes and make them not a
reasonable
credible
doubt.
Yeah, give them
reasonable doubt.
Make this witness not credible because you would lie on your tax form. You obviously lie here too, right?
Yeah.
But we can't apply the same logic here.
Right.
Oh, they lie about how Tower 7 fell when clearly there's no proof in the history of the world of a tower falling.
They shipped out 160 possible witnesses.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, they
got rid of all the evidence within months
yes.
of it falling
yes.
without examining any of it.
Yeah.
They didn't test it. Oh, they didn't test any of it for explosives. Oh, they found a truckload of bombs.
Yeah.
Down the street the same day. They just forgot to keep mentioning about.
Yeah.
But there's no evidence of explosives.
They brought all the security off of high alert 5 days before the planes hit.
Yeah, they took the bomb sniffing dogs out of there 6 days ahead of time. Just start poking holes in it. And if the holes don't start getting people to ask those questions, then there's just no hope for them. I'm sorry.
Right.
There's just not hope for them, and stop spending your time on those people. And that's the problem with a lot of conspiracy theorists. They just want to shove it at everybody's face.
Yeah.
And this is why I don't call ourselves a conspiracy theory podcast, because even though most of what we talk about, a lot of people would consider conspiracy theories, but we don't talk like flat earth. We don't talk about the moon landing, even though I have my opinions about the moon landing. We don't talk about Bigfoot and shit like that.
Yeah.
But when it comes to shit like this, this directly impacted the next 20 years of our life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And was it for what they said it was? Because if it wasn't, then we didn't go to Afghanistan for why we said.
Right.
If Saddam Hussein wasn't connected to the 9/11, which we all know wasn't the case now, then why the fuck did we go to Iraq?
Yeah.
Oh, if it wasn't for, you add it just compiled. It's just like, well, he is, what did they call him? A state sponsor of terrorism.
Right.
So we got to go in there, and they got the WMDs. Well, it comes to find out, he wasn't connected to the terrorists at all. But we still got the WMDs. Well, and then it finds out there was no fucking WMDs. So it's like the last 20 years were a fucking sham.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the last 20 years are what led us to the spot we're in today.
Yeah.
Where because imagine this. If 9/11 never happened and the Patriot Act never happened, that initially like chiseled a chunk out of our rights.
Yeah.
Do you think today or 2 years ago we'd be in the spot we're in where we like have zero right? Would they be in that spot if it wasn't for the precursor they set back in 2001?
No, not at all. And I'll go beyond that. Okay, so not only would we not be in that, but financially we'd be better off because we wouldn't have spent trillions of dollars overseas fighting wars that didn't need to be fought. Right? We wouldn't have that soldiers dead that didn't need to be dead.
Well,
right?
that and a lot of the anti-government or like the skepticism of the government from the 90s would have carried on into the 2000s. And imagine where we would be now if we just continued to roll that government skepticism. We had to start over.
Yeah.
And what, roughly like 06 or 07 before people started to realize, hey, this war's kind of bullshit.
Right.
I mean, 5, 6 years, maybe 10 years before people were like.
And it was the liberals who began asking the questions.
Yeah, because there's George Bush.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, but it was what was her name? Was it Cindy Sheehan, whose son had died over there, where she was like coming after Bush? You remember there used to be the billboards down in Iowa City?
No, I wasn't here at that time.
No, okay, they were there for years. Anyways, yeah. So I mean, it was the liberals that started coming after George W. because of that, saying this war was a sham.
But yeah, you had the 90s where we're just pulling back from the government, anti-government, and it was getting to then we talked about OKC happened and people went into the woodworks, but I don't think they still gained that trust back. But then 9/11 happened and everybody's on the same page because now it's us versus the brown people, and we got to take out the guys that did this. And so that just pulled us all back together. Like Kissinger said, it's like, what a better way to unite the world than like a second Pearl Harbor or a foreign act of terrorism or something like that. And it did. It was a genius. It happened.
But look at the cycle we're at now. Okay. Because I had mentioned before when we were talking about the 90s, how that group of militia people were most likely from Vietnam. Now we have a whole new group of soldiers coming back over from overseas.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the people I know that I served, like several, I'm not going to say all of them, several of the people I know have pulled away from the whole like pro government, pro like feds. Like a lot of them, a lot of the libertarian podcasters we talk to that have same sentiments as us. The majority of them are like, yeah, I served, did my 5 years, and I got out and realized it's all bullshit. It's interesting how that works.
Yeah. And as we talked about, things are cyclical. So look for that OKC.
Yeah. And then
look for another
11. Yeah.
We gotta bring the American people back together, right?
But just imagine like the amount of distrust in the vaccinations that there was. Imagine if 9/11 never happened. Like I said, and we just kept increasing. I think we'd be at probably like 85% of the people that are like, fuck you. I'm not, I don't believe a goddamn thing you say.
Right.
But it's like we talked about how Trump would like set back them like so many years, like the elitists. So if that's what you still subscribe to, like they had their agenda, the Agenda 21, Agenda 30, whatever. And we're like, well, Trump kind of was like the wrench in the cogs there that set him back. Well, it's like 9/11 was the wrench in the cog of like anti-government or like skepticism in the government. Like I feel like we would have probably overthrown the government by now if 9/11 never happened.
All right, that's a good way to look at it.
So I don't know. That's just my thoughts. And again, looking at today, and you said you were on board with this is what kind of switch your thing, and it's just like everything that's going on today. It's just like, well, like COVID's a hole in the plot line, I guess. So if you don't believe COVID, you got to not believe the next thing. Like, okay, see, if you don't believe that, then it's plausible that 9/11 was.
And to be honest, the first thing that got me double thinking things was I was taking a military history class. and I was learning about the first Iraq War.
Yeah.
And just all the shenanigans that went on with that.
Babies in the incubators.
Well, no, it wasn't that. But it was basically us telling Saddam, yeah, go ahead, do what you need to do. And then all of a sudden Bush going in after him.
It's like, you can't do that, but you told me I could do
right,
this.
exactly. Right. It was that, and then just the way, I mean, you didn't even hear about the way the United States is, I mean, totally destroyed an entire generation of Iraqis with irradiated armament.
Yeah.
And I mean, just murdered entire generations. And so then it was after that got me like looking back into other things. But then, yes, COVID was a huge thing.
Yeah. So I don't know. What do y'all think? Was it 9/11 an inside job? Was 9/11? So how about you? 9/11 inside job, or was it something like Pearl Harbor where we knew it was coming, we allowed it to happen, or combo of both, maybe?
I think there was elements in the government that were part of the planning.
Yeah.
I'm not ready to say that everybody was in on it.
Yeah, and people ask, like, how could they pull off something so massive and keep everybody quiet?
And that's the thing. To pull it off, you can't. It had to be a very small amount of number of people. But definitely,
they always tie
Kissinger and Cheney.
They always tie this to the conspiracy theorists respond to that with the Manhattan Project, and the father of the Manhattan Project had this theory of compartmentalization. That you worked on your little section here. You had no idea what you were even working on. You were just here to make this one little section. I mean, it's possible that they did that. It's like, here, just drop this thing off here, and we'll do this thing here. You park that over there, and you put these here, and nobody has a fucking clue.
But we know from I mean, doing our different shows, how things are divided up, right? These NGOs, right? And that creates this plausible deniability.
Right. Compartmentalization.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Right. Exactly. So, I mean, we know how the NED operates, right? We know that different presidents have their own hit squads that they use.
Now, you say, I don't feel, I mean, people say, I don't feel that they could pull that thing off without letting people in on the know of it, or the word getting out, or something fucking up because the government fucks.
Right.
Then look at COVID and how they pulled that off, and all the people, the media, the freaking medical field, the scientists, the politicians, everybody just in on this joke.
And it's easier nowadays.
Yeah.
Because they have the internet.
Yeah.
That they can manipulate.
Well, yeah.
Right.
Obviously.
Data just disappears.
Obviously. And
right?
you see like how data disappeared from 9/11. Like when nobody talks about this freaking truck full of bombs.
Right.
But I feel like if you can wrap your head around the government pulling off whatever COVID was, you should be able to wrap your head around 9/11. At least be able to question.
And I do feel like there is a large amount of Americans now that look back at COVID and be like, oh, what the fuck?
Yeah, well, look back a little further. Just push them a little further. That's all I got to say.
Yeah.
Your government hates you. They don't care about expelling 3,000 lives. You're just pawns to them. So, I mean, don't be surprised if you're one of the ones that they're willing to sacrifice in the name of whatever it is they're trying to accomplish. They don't fucking care.
Yeah, you have to assume you are.
Yeah,
I think.
I mean, how many million or thousands of soldiers died in these freaking pointless wars?
Yeah.
Just to financially benefit the Halliburtons, the Dick Cheneys, and the whatever Henry Kissinger's out there. They're just like, yeah, we're just gonna send them all to war. Yeah, thousands of people. So you're telling me they can send you to a fucking pointless war and let you die in the name of oil, in the name of expansion, colonialization, whatever, but you're not willing to think that the government would allow 3,000 people to die in a freaking burning tower. It's the same goddamn thing.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe one's fiction, one's not fiction, but at the end of the day, they don't fucking, they've made a point that they don't care about you enough to value 3,000 lives.
Well, they had a fucking drone bomb a birthday house in Afghanistan.
But that was brown people.
Right. Oh yeah, sure.
That was brown people.
Right.
You gotta realize
differentiate.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Government hates you. That's all we gotta say. Once you come to that realization, you can wrap your head around 9/11 not being the
look
official
through
story.
history, ask questions, because none of the narratives are what you think they are.
Again, none of these theories that we're saying we are necessarily saying are true.
No.
We are pointing you in a direction to say,
Yeah.
look at it. Just please, just fucking look at it. That's all I want you to do. And then come back and ask the question. And let me ask you, now, do you have any questions? Because if you have any questions, then it all goes out the window.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's fair to say you should question everything the government tells you.
Yes.
Everything.
Yeah. I mean, the reason why they're in the position they're in is because people don't
wanna
question it. They don't
right.
want, they just want to live their lives and be comfortable. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all I got for this episode. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a brain fryer.
Yeah.
But again, it's a conversation that needs to be had.
It is. And again, this is probably the only 9/11 episode we will do unless something crazy comes out. Then obviously we're going to talk about it.
Yeah.
But don't think this is going to happen every year, and don't be like, oh, another 9/11
No.
episode.
Maybe the 50th anniversary we'll do another one.
Yeah, if we're still around, sure. If this country is still around, sure. That's all the time we got for this week. Make sure you share this all over, far and wide across the webosphere, because that's how we get our name out there. We are here to expose bullshit, and that's what this episode was. It's not a conspiracy episode. It's let's expose shit for what it is, or for what it could be, at least for what it's not. Expose it for specifically what it's not,
right?
Which is the official 9/11 report.
Right.
Share this all over. Like, subscribe. We'll love you for it.
Absolutely.
Have a great rest of your week. I have no positive end for that. I mean, it is what it is. 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
I guess
it sucks.
People waking up to it would be a positive note for me.
Yeah.
Waking up to
asking questions again, realizing that your government is not in it for you.
No. So that's it. Have a great rest of your week. We'll talk to you next time. Goodbye.
The Break the Bell podcast is brought to you by you. So pat yourself on the back, because without you, we would be talking to ourselves. A special thanks to our Patreon members, Justin Zielinski, Remzo Martinez, Stephanie Parker, and T.O. Jacobson. A shout out to our sponsors, Run Your Mouth Coffee, the On the Run podcast, and Goulash Media. If you'd like to help support us, visit patreon.com/breakthebell or buy our garbage at breakthebell.bigcartel.com. Get back here next week and let us continue to invade your ear holes. And as always, never stop talking.